To put it bluntly, the other party did not even know the rules in this regard. So what could one say about her? I'm not good with words. Please forgive me, Elder Chin. But there's something I'd like to ask again. When can I go to Heaven Ascending Cliff? Bing Wuching asked again. Didn't I say it last time? It depends on when Grandmaster Lin Yi comes out of seclusion. I don't know the exact relationship between little friend Wuching and him, but he's the Grandmaster of my primordial Blue Cloud sect after all, so I definitely have to think for his sake. I hope little friend Wuching can forgive me for this. Chen Jiu put on a show of being considerate for Lin Yi. Is that so? But why did I hear the disciples of your North Island Blue Cloud sect talking in private, saying that Elder Chin and your Grandmaster Lin Yi don't seem to be on good terms? Even your Chun family's most valued deputy sect leader Chen Dongqing was beaten up by Lin Yi. Am I right? Bing Wuching exposed him mercilessly. What? There's such a thing? Chen Jiu pretended to be confused and glared at Lu Pingon, who was beside him. Previously, he thought that this personal disciple of his was quite capable and could take on great responsibilities. But in the end, he couldn't even do such a small thing. He was also a good-for-nothing. Lu Pingon smiled bitterly. These days, he had been trying to think of ways to prevent the disciples of his sect from having contact with Bing Wuching, but he couldn't stop the disciples from talking in private. The disciples of the Qin family's sect were fine, but the numerous local sects wouldn't be so obedient. With Bing Wuching's ability, as long as someone talked about her, she would naturally know. This matter couldn't be blamed on him at all. But since Chen Jiu was glaring at him, Lu Pingon could only continue. He also pretended to be confused and said, "It can't be, right? Although Grand Supreme Elder and Grand Master haven't officially met, that's because Grandmaster has been busy with seclusion ever since he arrived. They haven't even seen each other, so how could there be any conflict? Then what's the matter with Deputy Sect Leader Chen?" Bing Wuching looked at the two's expressions. Oh, Deputy Sect Leader Chen isn't here at the moment. He's out on official business, so those discussions you've heard should be nonsense. Those disciples often talk nonsense in private. Please don't laugh at them. Lu Pingon tried to fool him. Bing Wuching looked straight into his eyes, and Lu Pingon didn't dare to meet her eyes at all. Slowly, she said, "You're lying?" Huh. Lu Pingon was taken aback, but he quickly forced a smile and said, "Elder Bing, you must be joking. Everything I've said is absolutely true, and I'm not hiding anything." Bing Wuching didn't say anything. She was very sure that the other party was lying. However, since the other party refused to admit it, there was no way she could expose him face to face, unless she could find a witness to confront him or find Chen Dongqing. Unfortunately, neither of these two options were realistic. Looks like everything is clear now. It's just some disciples gossiping. You don't have to take it too seriously, my young friend Wuching. If there's any news about Grandmaster Lin Yi, we'll definitely inform you immediately. Please don't be impatient. Chunjiu finally stepped forward and said. At this point, Bing Wuching naturally couldn't say anything more. She immediately turned and left. After Bing Wuching left for a long time, Lu Pingon finally breathed a sigh of relief. He said worriedly, "Master, this Bing Wuching isn't easy to fool. I'm worried that he'll stir up more trouble. The key is that he's in the nascent soul stage. I can't stop him even if I want to. What if he really does something out of line?" "What do you mean?" "Tell everyone to shut up. If anyone dares to gossip again, tell him to come and see me." Chunjo snorted coldly. "But what about Xianijia?" "Theoretically, no one in the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, from the top management of the Golden Core stage to the ordinary disciples, whether they were from the Chen family's faction or the local faction, dared to disobey the order personally from Chanjiu, but Xianijia was an anomaly. This guy was obviously on Lin Yi's side. They were bound together for good or bad. How could he be frightened by Chenjia's order? Humph, if he doesn't listen, you'll keep an eye on him. Chenjia's eyes turned sharp. If it weren't for the fact that Chen Dongqing was caught, and if it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that Chen Dongqing wouldn't be able to be saved after falling out with Lin Yi, he would have asked someone to get rid of this reckless Xianijia long ago. Chapter 5360. Latest news. Tomorrow is 515, Chidian's anniversary celebration, the day with the most benefits. Apart from the gift bags and school bags, The 515 red packets must be searched. There's no reason not to snatch them. Set the alarm clock, yes? Lu Pingan's heart skipped a beat. He thought that he had disappointed Chinju again and again. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, there would be nothing left to say. However, it turned out that stopping Xi and Egf from getting close to Bing Wuqing was not a small matter, especially not a small matter. To be precise, it was not difficult to stop Xi and Egf from getting close to Bing Wuqing, but the key was, what if Bing Wuqing took the initiative to look for Xi and Egf? Bing Wuqing hadn't thought of this before, but after hearing the rumors, even an outsider could see that Xi and Egf was on Lin Yi's side. In this situation, if she wanted to get in touch with Lin Yi, the best way was to go through Xi and Egf, other than to force her way through climbing Heaven Cliff. Lu Pingan couldn't stop them at all. He didn't dare to and couldn't stop them. He could only watch Bing Wuqing and Xi and Egf talk, unable to do anything. After hearing the news, Chen Jiao, the Grand Supreme Elder, finally couldn't sit still anymore. He frowned and said, "What's the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi?" Just to see Lin Yi, she flew thousands of miles from Middle Island to North Island. She couldn't get rid of him no matter how many times she tried, and now she won't leave. Is there an end to this? Both he and Lu Pingan had probed the relationship between Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi during their previous 2 meetings. Unfortunately, Bing Wuqing's mouth was tight, and she didn't reveal anything. "Master, we can't go on like this. It's too dangerous to let such an unstable factor stay here. We have to find a reason to persuade her to leave as soon as possible," Lu Pingan said with a bitter face. Facing a nascent soul cultivator like Bing Wuqing, he really didn't know what to do. He was completely led by the nose, and something would happen sooner or later. Do you think you can get rid of such a plague just because you want to? How could Chanju not want to get rid of Bing Wuqing as soon as possible? But with Bing Wuqing's attitude, if he was not allowed to see Lin Yi, how could he possibly leave? He won't stop until he reaches his goal. If he doesn't see Lin Yi, it's unrealistic to let him leave just like that. "Master, why don't we just let him go to Ascending Heaven Cliff?" Lu Pingan suggested. "Humph, you are too naive. Do you think he will leave obediently after seeing Lin Yi? With the current situation, if he really has a good relationship with Lin Yi, wouldn't he stay to help Lin Yi and make us have one more powerful enemy?" Chunjiu scoffed at this suggestion. Release Bing Wuqing to see Lin Yi? Unless he was out of his mind, he wouldn't do something so stupid. If that happened, there would only be one outcome. It would definitely not be Bing Wuqing retreating obediently, but Lin Yi would be like a tiger that had grown wings. One Lin Yi was enough to render him helpless. If Bing Wuqing, who was in the nascent soul stage, was added to the mix, how could he handle it? "Master, actually, I don't think it's impossible," Lu Pingan said meaningfully. Chunjiu frowned, but seeing that his expression was firm, he motioned for him to continue. "Master, putting Bing Wuqing aside, our negotiation with Lin Yi has already reached a stalemate. Deputy Sect Leader Qin's health condition is deteriorating day by day. We really can't drag this on any longer. We need to find a way to break out of this stalemate as soon as possible, and this Bing Wuqing just happens to be a good way to break out of this stalemate," Lu Pingan said. "Be more specific." Chunji's interest was immediately piqued. "Yes, since it's a negotiation, there will always be concessions and compromises. I think we can make a concession and let Bing Wuqing see Lin Yi, but on the condition that Lin Yi can cure Deputy Sect Leader Chen," Lu Pingan said. "Do you think Lin Yi will agree?" Chunju said thoughtfully. "It depends on what he has in mind. Everyone knows that you're the stabilizing force of our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Without your approval, no one can gain a foothold here. So if Lin Yi wants to gain a foothold in our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he'll have to reach a compromise with you in the end. In that case, as long as he's given a suitable way out, he'll definitely choose to concede," Lu Pingan analyzed. "But what if he has other intentions?" Chunjiu frowned. "Since there's nothing left to say, then there's nothing more to say. No matter what, we can at least sound out the other party's attitude. In order to break out of this stalemate, we have to make the first move. What do you think, Master?" Lu Pingan suggested carefully. They were already in a passive position, and now with the addition of Bing Wuqing, there was nothing more to say. Since they had no choice but to make the first move, they might as well be straightforward and sound out the other party's stance. Chunju pondered for a moment. Given Qin Dongqing's current state, it was indeed inappropriate to delay any further. In the end, he could only nod and say, "Then let's do it this way. You go and talk to them, but you have to remember that our purpose is not just to sound them out. The most important thing is to find a way to get Bing Wuching away as soon as possible. As long as she's gone, everything else is our internal problem. We can talk about it however we want, and it's not impossible for me to meet Linny in person." In other words, as long as they managed to get rid of Bing Wuching, a huge external threat, then Lin Yi would not be able to escape from his palm no matter how capable he was in the face of a supreme elder in the nascent soul realm. Understood. Lu Pingon immediately responded and left. Faced with Lu Pingon's concession this time, Xianijia was somewhat surprised and shocked. But after thinking about it, it made sense. After all, Bing Wuching, a master in the nascent soul realm, had come all the way here to help. If Chunjiu continued to insist, they would be the ones to suffer in the end. This time, of course, Xianijia would not evade it like before. Instead, he brought Lu Pingon to Lin Yi and asked him to talk to Lin Yi face to face. "Supreme Elder wants me to cure Chen Dongqing?" After listening to Lu Pingon's words, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. "Yes, you also know that Sect Leader Hong is not here now, and now Deputy Sect Leader Chan is like this. There is no one in the entire Green Cloud sect who can take charge of the affairs, big or small. No matter what kind of differences there are between you and Supreme Elder, at the end of the day, you still have to think for the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, right? Such a big sect can't possibly have no one who can properly receive the guests from the outer gate, right?" Lu Pingon said earnestly. "What's the condition?" Lin Yi asked casually. Supreme Elder said that as long as you can cure Deputy Sect Leader Chen, he can choose to take a step back and let Bing Wuching come here to see you, Lu Pingon said with a smile. "That's it." Lin Yi glanced at him with a faint smile. Of course, the condition that Lu Pingon got from Chanjiu was not just this. Chapter 5361. Latest news. Tomorrow was 515, Chidian's anniversary celebration, the day with the most benefits. Apart from the gift bags and school bags, this time's 515 red packets were definitely worth watching. There was no reason not to snatch the red packets. Set the alarm clock if it was just to let Bing Wuching come up. From Lin Yi's point of view, it was not attractive at all. However, this was a negotiation, and he could not show his bottom line right away. That would be too stupid. If this is the only condition, and you don't even have the least bit of sincerity, then there's no need to talk anymore. "Elder Lu, please go back." Xianijia stood at the side and chimed in. "Don't be anxious. Before I came here, the Grand Supreme Elder said that after Bing Wuching is sent away, he will personally appear and talk to you. When that time comes, he will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. What do you think?" Lu Pingon quickly added. To Lin Yi, it was more advantageous for Chanjiu to appear personally than for Bing Wuching to come up the mountain to meet him. This was because it was the only way he could prove his identity as the immemorial Grand Uncle Master, unless Chanjiu turned against him. Of course, Lin Yi did not think too much of this. This was just Chanjiu and Lu Pingon's one-sided wishful thinking. "There's no proof," Lin Yi said lightly. "Could it be that Grand Supreme Elder wants to make a written contract for you, Grand Supreme Elder?" Lu Pingon frowned. "Haha, rather than believe in a written contract, I'd rather believe in a ghost. How about this? Let Bing Wuching come up to see me first, and we can talk about other things later." Lin Yi decided. This? Lu Pingon hesitated, then nodded and agreed. "Okay, to show our sincerity, we'll take a step back first, but we'll wait for Grand Supreme Elder's reply next." His meaning was clear. If Lin Yi sent Bing Wuching away, then they could continue the next step of the negotiation. If not, then it would be equivalent to completely falling out, and there would be nothing to talk about. Fine. Lin Yi nodded. Even though he was trapped in the one-step to heaven formation and could not get out, he had no intention of leaving Bing Wuching behind as a helper. Compared to this side, Lung Lung, who was left in the Snow Sword faction of the Middle Island, needed the protection of Bing Wuching, a nascent soul expert, more. After all, there was still a huge hidden danger in the form of Xue Jianfeng. In addition, he had another consideration. He was afraid that Bing Wuqing would really fight with Qinjiu on impulse. Although she was an expert of the Yuanying realm, she had just broken through, and her foundation was not stable. If that happened, it would not only mean that she would completely fall out with the Green Cloud clan of the North Island, but Bing Wuqing would definitely be the one who would suffer losses. There would be no benefits. Lu Pingon was very efficient and brought Bing Wuqing up in no time. Of course, Bing Wuqing did not have an identity token, so she could only stand outside the one-step to heaven matrix and talk to Lin Yi. Otherwise, he might not be able to get out after coming in. Boss Lin Yi, I'm relieved that you're fine. Bing Wuqing breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that Lin Yi was safe and sound. Even though she knew that Lin Yi would not be defeated so easily by Qinjiu, she was still worried that she could not see Lin Yi for a long time. Now, she was finally relieved. Hee, what could happen to me? Lin Yi smiled. He noticed the way she addressed him. It was obvious that she had learned it from Wu Qintian and the others. It seemed that this arrogant, immemorial prodigy had already recognized his own position. Their relationship was no longer one of mere coercion and exploitation. She had become his follower with sincerity. So what do you need me to do now? Help you break the matrix, or deal with Qinjiu directly? Bing Wuqing did not have the habit of making small talk. Even if she wanted to express her loyalty, she was simple and direct. You don't need to do anything. Go back to the Snow Sword faction and look after Long Long for me. Just stay put for now, Lin Yi said. What about Shui Jianfeng? Bing Wuqing could not figure out what Lin Yi was thinking. Things were different now. When he came to the North Island, he had openly betrayed the center. Naturally, there was no need for him to continue feigning civility. If it was not for the fear of disrupting Lin Yi's plan, he would have killed Shui Jianfeng directly and not let him live. If he doesn't move, you don't move either. No matter what he and the center do, your priority is to ensure the safety of Long Long and yourself. You don't need to worry about anything else for now, Lin Yi instructed. Okay, I understand. Bing Wuqing understood. Even though Lin Yi did not reveal more, she had already understood what Lin Yi was thinking. If he didn't move for now, it meant that there would definitely be a big move with the center in the future. It was just that the time was not right yet. Oh, right. It's rare for you to come to the North Island. I can't let you make a wasted trip. As Lin Yi spoke, he called Xianijia, who was waiting at the side, and gave him 2 elixirs to pass to Bing Wuqing. Thank you, big boss. Bing Wuqing's eyes lit up instantly. Strictly speaking, the Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixir was his main purpose for coming to the North Island this time. Even though it was a little too realistic and even despicable to say it out loud, it was undeniable that it was the truth. To put it nicely, a person like him was extremely rational, but to put it bluntly, he was actually a mercenary. He just wasn't as short-sighted as the others. Lin Yi was well aware of this, but he did not mind. Since he had become someone's boss, he had to have a corresponding vision and tolerance. As long as Bing Wuqing served him well, he would never choke her in the supply of elixirs. After all, as long as he could control her, the stronger Bing Wuqing was, the better it would be for him. Putting away the 2 Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs, Bing Wuqing did not express her gratitude verbally. Instead, she solemnly bowed to Lin Yi, turned around and left. Since Lin Yi had asked him to bide his time and take care of Long Long, then he would do it. Obviously, there was no need for him to meddle in the troubles of the North Island. From the beginning, he had predicted that a mere Qinjiu would not be a problem for Lin Yi. With 2 Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs, if everything went well, she could advance 2 levels in a short period of time and become a middle-stage Nascent Soul expert. Bing Wuqing was looking forward to her future even more. Bing Wuqing left swiftly. She didn't bid farewell to anyone when she descended from the ascending cliff. She rode on her snow eagle and disappeared into the horizon. All right, it's time to get down to business after dragging it out for so long. Lin Yi stretched himself. Until now, Xianijia was still in a daze. The 2 pills that he had just passed to Gu Lingji were too shocking. He was still in a state of shock until now. Those were the legendary Supreme Grade Gathering Nascent Elixirs. Before this, he was still very sure that Lin Yi was the grandmaster of his sect. Even if he was not, he must have a close relationship with the North Island's Green Cloud sect. But now, He was really doubting it. What kind of monster was he to give away the supreme grade gathering nascent elixirs so casually and two at once? A small sect like the North Island's Green Cloud sect would not be able to accommodate such a big shot, right? You want the elixirs too? Linny glanced at him. Exionegia did not know how to react at that moment. Chapter 5362. Wasn't that obvious? Who wouldn't want elixirs? Forget about the legendary elixirs like the Gathering Nascent elixir. He would be thankful to his ancestors for just one golden elixir. He had been stuck at the early stage of golden elixir all these years without making any progress. On the one hand, it was due to his innate aptitude, which was incomparable to a freak like Bing Wuching. But on the other hand, he wasn't that bad. He was at least at the intermediate level, and the reason why he couldn't advance was because of the elixirs. What could he do if he couldn't get golden elixirs? Here, Lin Yi tossed a few golden elixirs to Exionegia. After a period of observation, Exionegia had gained Lin Yi's approval. Moreover, Exionegia was going to be entrusted with important tasks in the future. Therefore, it was reasonable to give him some elixirs to strengthen his strength. No matter what, the strength of an early-stage golden elixir was not enough. His dream came true without warning. Exionegia was at a loss for what to do. It took him a long time to catch the golden elixirs, and he said gratefully, "Thank you, Grandmaster." "No need. You deserve it. You can go and call someone," Linny said. "Call who?" Exionegia was stunned. Lu Pingon, of course. Now that Bing Wuching has been sent away as they wished, it's almost time for a showdown. That Grand Elder's patience should be running out by now, right? Linny said lightly. As a result, just as he finished speaking, there were people walking slowly towards climbing Heaven Cliff. One of them was Lu Pingon, who was carrying the unconscious Chen Dongqing on his back, and the old man walking in front of him was Grand Elder Chanjiu. Just as Linny expected, this Grand Elder's patience had long run out. In fact, even without the unexpected interlude of Bing Wuching, he was already prepared to have a showdown with Lin Yi. After all, Chen Dongqing's current condition was not optimistic. When a person's primordial spirit was drained, their body would naturally begin to wither and even slowly die. Even powerful cultivators were no exception to this. Compared to ordinary people, the only difference was that their bodies were stronger and could last a little longer. There was no essential difference between the two. And now, Chen Dongqing was already on the brink of death. This unprecedented situation was something that even Chen Jiu could do nothing about. Once Chen Dongqing's body died, everything would be over. Even if his primordial spirit was still alive, it would only be a lonely soul, destined not to last long. The point was, how could the Chen family of North Island hand over such a big responsibility to a lone ghost? Without any greetings or words, Chen Jiu and Lu Pingon directly stepped into the one-step to heaven matrix. The intention of placing Chen Dongqing, whose breath was extremely weak, in front of Lin Yi was obvious. However, the current Chen Dongqing's physical body was too weak. Even if his primordial spirit was intact, it could not easily recover in a short time. When the primordial spirit returned, the whole person was still in a half-dead state. The only difference from before was that there was a trace of indescribable temperament. Lu Pingon did not understand, but with Chunji's eyesight, it was easy to see the difference between the two. Previously, Chen Dongqing was a piece of rotten wood that was constantly rotting, and there was no cure for it. Now, although he still looked like a piece of rotten wood, there was a glimmer of vitality. Next, as long as he was nursed well, it would not take long for him to return to normal. "Well, it's your turn to fulfill your promise, Supreme Elder." Linny raised his eyebrows. "That's right." Chunjia winked at Lu Pingon, signaling him to take the still unconscious Chen Dongqing away. After the two of them walked out of the range of the one-step to heaven array, Chunjia slowly said, "Before that, this old man hopes that you can answer my question honestly. Say it." Lin Yi's face did not show any abnormality. Chapter 5363. Linny looked at him calmly. After a while, he grinned without any sincerity. "I've already told you, he's your martial granduncle." "Humph. Looks like I won't be able to hear the truth. Chunjia's expression changed and his aura became extremely sharp. For the first time, he released the aura of a nascent soul cultivator without holding back. Xianijia was taken aback. Facing the opponent's imposing manner, it was extremely difficult for him, an expert in the early stage of Gold Core, to even stand there. If it wasn't for Linny standing next to him, he might have knelt down on the spot. After all, the power and terror of a nascent soul old monster was deeply rooted in the ancient Jianghu. What? Is Grand Elder going to go back on his word? Lin Yi's expression was still the same. He was not moved by the other party's aura at all. In his eyes, the so-called Yuanying stage old monster's aura was actually just like that. There was really nothing to be surprised about. It's not that I'm going back on my word. It's just that as the old guy of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, I have to keep a close eye on this kind of thing. If I let some shady people in, I'll be criticized by others. Although Chenjia's tone was calm, his aura became more and more intense. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let this matter rest. To be precise, he didn't have this plan from the beginning. No matter whether Lin Yi, the primordial Uncle Master, was real or fake, he was destined to never let Lin Yi enter the Green Cloud sect of the North Island as he wished. After all, two tigers couldn't share one mountain. Apart from Qin Dongqing's concern, the other key reason why he didn't directly turn hostile for so long was that he didn't want to take risks before he figured out the strange means that Lin Yi had displayed before. Therefore, Chenjiu had not been idle during this period of time. He had been searching for all sorts of information related to absorbing souls. Unfortunately, it was to no avail. This was not strange. Even if the primordial underworld had always focused on the cultivation of the primordial spirit, and there were all kinds of primordial spirit techniques, such as the soul reaping hand and the primordial spirit devouring technique, were unheard of. After all, the strongest among them was only a nascent soul old monster. This was the limit of his level. So what if he researched more? Without information, it meant that he had no confidence. That was why Chenjiu had been patient. Until today, when his patience was completely exhausted. Of course, the unknown meant risks, but Chenjiu didn't think that he would really fall into the hands of a mere Lin Yi. At most, it would be a little troublesome. He was a nascent soul cultivator. Naturally, he had the arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. At the end of the day, it's still the same thing. Burning the bridge after crossing the river. As a Grand Elder, you change your attitude pretty quickly. Lin Yi didn't show any anger on his face. He didn't expect the other party to talk to him about honesty. If he really foolishly believed the other party's character, there was only one explanation. He was out of his mind. You can say whatever you want. Since you've chosen to challenge me, you should have been prepared for this. Isn't that right? Chunjiu did not feel the slightest bit embarrassed. At his level, his face had long been honed to the point of perfection. So what was this? No wonder you're a nascent soul cultivator. You look like you're going to eat me alive. Very scary, Linny said with a faint smile. You're about to die, but you're still quite stubborn. Chunjiu replied with a cold snort. Listening to the conversation between these two people, Xianijia on the side was completely motionless. The two big shots were ready to do it themselves. What should a small fry like him do? Should he stay and help, or should he escape? In terms of helping, Xianijia knew that he couldn't help at all with his little strength. It would be good enough if he stayed and didn't help. But if he just ran away like this, not to mention that it would be hard to explain to Linny, he was still a Gold Core stage elder after all. He was still a person who cared about his reputation. Glancing at Xianijia, who was hesitating next to him, Chunjiu suddenly said, I heard that you also brought a few disciples from the secular world with good qualifications. If you don't want to get involved, let them hide first. Don't worry. As long as they don't make trouble in the future, I won't take revenge. I still have this little bit of tolerance. This was the truth. Chunjiu went back on his words to Linny because Linny had his weakness. Whether it was status or strength, Linny had the potential to threaten him. To a certain extent, he could be considered as someone who was qualified to be his opponent. Of course, he could do anything at this time. But Lingshan and the others were different. Although they were all Lin Yi's people, for a nascent soul cultivator like Chenjiu, It would be too narrow-minded to even care about these people. Now, not only House Chin of the North Island, even the entire Jadian of the North Island was in a state of no successor. As long as he killed Lin Yi, Lingshan and the others would be a group of dragons without a leader. They wouldn't be a threat at all. Instead, they were all good prospects. The price was just to spend some time to train them. No need. Lin Yi's answer was straight to the point. In fact, until now, Lingshan and the others hadn't shown themselves. They were all in their own rooms practicing in isolation, not paying attention to the outside world. Oh? Chunjiu couldn't help but be surprised. His lips curled into a mocking smile. You're so cruel to your own men? I've really underestimated you. What a character. The sky-climbing cliff was not a big place, and the area covered by the one-step to sky-climbing formation was even smaller. Even if it was a fight between two ordinary gold core experts, it could easily sweep everything away. Now, if it was a nascent soul-old monster like Chinjiu, he could easily destroy this place with just a wave of his hand. In other words, if these people, including Xianigia, stayed here, they would inevitably be implicated. With their strength, no one could leave this place alive. From Chinjiu's perspective, what Lin did was equivalent to sentencing them to death. Cruel and merciless was absolutely appropriate. Cruel and merciless? Lin smiled and looked at the nascent soul cultivator. I say, are you misunderstanding something, Grand Elder? Oh? Chunjiu paused. I never planned to fight with you. Even if we were to fight face to face, I would at most make you follow in Qin Dongqing's footsteps. There's no need to go through so much effort. Lin seriously seriously. What? Even Chunjiu couldn't help but be stunned by his tone. It was true that he still couldn't understand the strange method the other party used on Qin Dongqing, but he was a nascent soul-old monster. Did this brat think that the same method would be effective on a nascent soul-old monster? He was too naive. Chapter 53-64. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Very interesting. Chunjiu reacted and laughed. His powerful momentum suddenly became more and more wild and fierce. He laughed loudly and said, if you have the ability, then come and have a try. As he spoke, Chunjiu took a light step forward. However, before he finished his step, his whole body swayed inexplicably, and then he had already crossed a distance of tens of feet and appeared directly behind Lin Yi. The top body movement of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, half-step jump. This was not the end. At this moment, Chunjiu's fingertip had already pointed at the back of Lin Yi's head. An extremely fierce energy chi instantly condensed into an invincible magic weapon and shot out. Instant kill. Xianigia, who was watching this scene from the side, suddenly had his heart in his throat. Half-step flip followed by instant kill. Such an attack was absolutely fast and lethal. In the face of an unknown opponent like Lin Yi, Chinjiu, a nascent soul realm-old monster, did not underestimate his opponent at all. He was going all out, as if the person standing in front of him was a Yuanying realm-old monster from another sect, a strong enemy at the same level as him. Chunjiu's attack was indeed fast, but unfortunately, his opponent was Lin Yi. Even if he did not use the extremely fast body movement, he could easily avoid his instant kill in the state of half-primordial spirit. As expected, Lin Yi just swayed slightly and easily avoided the instant kill. Your strength is really not weak. No wonder you are so arrogant. But you can avoid one. I wonder if you can avoid 10? Chinjiu appeared above Lin Yi's head condescendingly. At this moment, a powerful finger strength was shot out from each of his fingertips. It was the ultimate version of instant kill, 10 consecutive finger kill. 10 finger strengths interweaved into a dense killing net, completely covering Lin Yi, leaving him nowhere to hide. Hee, you are quite confident, aren't you? Lin Yi's voice then sounded above his head. How could it be? Chenjiu suddenly turned pale with fright. He had clearly locked the position of Lin Yi with his divine consciousness. No matter how fast the opponent was, it was impossible for him to escape unscathed. How could he suddenly appear above him? What the hell was this? It was only at this moment that the nascent soul stage old monster suddenly reacted. Although he looked no different from an ordinary person, he was still a primordial spirit. Chunjiu's reaction was fast. He wanted to get rid of it the moment he realized something was wrong. Unfortunately, he was still too slow. An invisible giant black hand had already enveloped his head. Chunjia's eyes quickly became empty in a short period of time, and then became completely lifeless. He then collapsed to the ground and no longer moved. The situation was exactly the same as Qin Dongqing before. Xianijia was dumbfounded. He was speechless for a long time. From his point of view as a bystander, this pinnacle battle really came abruptly, but it ended even more abruptly. In his expectation, even if Lin Yi was really an extraordinary existence, in order to kill a yuanying stage-old monster, he would at least have to go through a bitter battle. How could he kill him just like that? Was this still a powerful yuanying stage-old monster? What are you waiting for? Drag him out. Lin Yi glanced at him and ordered, Drag him out? Xianijia pointed at Chenjiu on the ground with trepidation. Even if he was unconscious at the moment, he was still a superior Grand Elder. He was a yuanying stage-old monster who stood at the top of the small Jianghu in the primitive times. Since when could such an existence receive such treatment? What else can I do? Stay here and get moldy? Lin Yi had a strange look on his face. He seemed to be pointing at something and said, You know what to do next, right? What to do? Xianijia was still at a loss. Everything that happened today was too sudden. He was not mentally prepared at all. Lin Yi did not tell him anything about how to deal with it. He did not even know what to do at this time. Grand Elder was killed, and there is no news from the leader. Isn't it obvious what to do next? Of course, it's to take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It's rare for there to be such a big power vacuum. Don't tell me you want someone else to take over the power vacuum? Lin Yi looked at him and said, Before he came to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he actually had no idea about the power inside the sect. The reason why he came to this point was that he was forced by the situation. If it were not for Chenjiu and Qin Dongqing, Lin Yi would not mind getting along with them peacefully. But now, even Chenjiu, the Grand Elder, had become like this. If he still did not take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, it would be too hypocritical, no matter what. Since he planned to establish a foothold in the small Jianghu in the primitive times, the first thing was to smooth over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Instead of letting others take over, for Lin Yi, the best candidate to take over was naturally Xianijia. As for himself, of course, he could not do it himself. He had to be a strong backer behind Xianijia. Otherwise, it would be a big trouble to appease the public opinion. After all, he was an outsider. Take over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? Do you want me to do it? Xianijia was completely stunned when he heard this. He was just an elder who ranked at the bottom of the early stage of Gold Core. He had never thought that he could defeat Chenjiu, the Grand Elder, nor had he thought about taking over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. He did not even dare to think about it. Are you afraid that no one will obey you? Lin Yi saw through his doubts at a glance. Although Xianijia was a good person who put his own safety first, he could tell from the fact that he turned to Lin Yi without hesitation at the last moment that he was not a good-for-nothing. Deep down in his heart, there was a huge ambition. Xianijia was speechless. Was there a need to ask this question? With his little strength, it was difficult for him to rope in a few allies. As for taking over the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, was that even possible? What's there to hesitate about? Drag this guy out. Who dares to obey you? Lin Yi pouted and pointed at Chenjiu on the ground. That's right. Xianijia's eyes suddenly lit up. Of course, he was not persuasive alone, but the Grand Elder on the ground was enough to convince everyone. The saying the strong are respected was not just an empty saying. Now that even the old monster in the Gathering Vitality realm was killed, who in the sect dared to be disobedient? Needless to say, the local factions had all kinds of complaints in the open and in the dark, but they did not dare to show it because of Grand Elder Chenjiu's tyranny. If someone could stand up and take down Chenjiu, even if they did not raise both hands to agree, most of them would not oppose it. After all, this was different from the invasion of foreign enemies. It was an internal struggle of the sect, an internal affair. Chapter 5365. After all, the prestige of an old monster in the yuanying realm was not just for show. They had the courage to go against Lin Yi before purely because they felt that he was just a swindler with no strength. To put it bluntly, the ignorant were fearless. In fact, after Qin Dongqing was beaten up, these people basically began to quiet down. The only one who really jumped up and down was Lu Pingon, and this was because he was negotiating for Chanjia's endorsement. Otherwise, even Lu Pingon would not dare to be so active. After all, no one was a fool. Everyone knew that the bird that sticks out will be shot. Knowing that Lin Yi was not to be trifled with, who would dare to jump up and down? And now, Lin Yi proved that he was not to be trifled with real means. The previous Qin Dongqing was just a small test, and Chen Ju was the one he wanted to get rid of. The whole process was easy. Thinking of this, Xianijia could not help but be excited. Although taking over the Green Cloud sect of the North Island still felt a little unreal, with the support of a big tree like Lin Yi, it was not completely impossible. But can I really do it with my little strength? Xianijia was still not very confident. Now, with the example of the Grand Elder, the effect of killing the chicken to warn the monkey was absolutely great. As long as there was the strength of a middle-stage gold core realm, Xianijia believed that he could control the overall situation. But the problem was that the strength of an early-stage gold core realm was a little too weak. It's not enough, so I have to come out in person to control the situation. That's enough, Lin Yi said. You'll come out in person? Xianijia was shocked. Even Chenjio was easily beaten half to death. If Lin Yi came out in person, the deterrent effect would be obvious. Not to mention the high-level gold core realm and ordinary disciples in the sect. Even another old monster in the Yuanying realm would have to think twice. But the problem was, could Lin Yi go out? Don't forget, this was still in the one-step to heaven formation. Even if Chenjio, the Grand Elder, was easily killed, it did not mean that Lin Yi could break out of the formation. This was completely different. The only way to break the one-step to heaven formation was to achieve 4 words. One step to heaven? Yes, so you can go and gather people. I'll be right there. Lin Yi smiled confidently. Then all right. Xianijia nodded heavily. Since Lin Yi had said so, he naturally had no reason to doubt it. He immediately dragged the unconscious Chunjiu out. He watched Xianijia leave. Lin Yi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Then, he slowly stretched his hand forward until he touched the invisible barrier. The corners of his mouth curled up. One step to heaven array. After studying it for so long, I should be able to get out, right? During this period of time, Lin Yi's efforts were not limited to cultivating his spirit power and the soul-hooking hand. How to break through the one-step to heaven matrix had always been one of the biggest problems in front of him. After all, he had never expected Chenjio and the others to obediently hand over their identity tokens. Of course, it was okay if they really couldn't break through. Now that the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island was leaderless, it shouldn't be too difficult for Xianijia to find a way to get an identity token. However, it was rare to encounter such a mysterious formation. If he couldn't break through by himself, but was forced to take the back door, would he still be Lin Yi? In theory, the only person who could really break through the one-step to heaven matrix was the legendary figure of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, who was called the Great Emperor. After all, this was the formation he set up himself. Other than that, no one else had ever heard of it. According to Xianijia, even a Yuanying realm-old monster like Chanjiu had never really broken through the one-step to heaven matrix. He had never really broken through the one-step to heaven matrix, and he rarely made such an attempt, because that was the domain of legendary figures. But now, Lin Yi was finally going to be the first person to try it. His fingertips touched the formation. In an instant, Lin Yi once again felt that mysterious feeling of being so close yet so far away. After this period of continuous fumbling, he wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling at all. In order to cross this barrier that was so close yet so far away, he'd thought of no less than 100 methods, but all of them had failed in the end. It wasn't entirely a problem of thinking. The main shackle was actually the strength itself. If one didn't have the strength beyond the Yuanying realm, it was impossible to break through the one-step to heaven matrix. This was probably the original intention of the legendary Great Emperor when he set up the one-step to heaven matrix. Originally, even if Lin Yi realized this, he would be helpless. However, because of the large amount of divine sense grassroot, regardless of the strength of the primordial spirit body, His primordial spirit was already a level higher than when he first came to the small ancient Jianghu. In terms of level alone, it had even recovered to the level of the original body on the Heaven Stage Island, a real mysterious ascension stage. If not, the power of his soul hooking hand would not suddenly become so strong, and even a Yuanying realm-old monster like Chenjiu could easily deal with it. For the small ancient Jianghu, which was used to the peak of the Yuanying realm, the current Lin Yi was undoubtedly a monster, a terrible monster who could easily pierce through the entire ceiling. With one step, Lin Yi instantly switched from the primordial spirit body to the primordial spirit form, and then quickly condensed into a very thin and long primordial spirit thread. If the onlookers had enough eyesight, they would find that this form was almost the same as when the primordial spirit projection was used. That's right, this was the countermeasure that Lin Yi came up with. Although the one step to heaven line was mysterious, but after all, it was not comparable to the real cross-realm projection. The difficulty of this did not lie in whether the primordial spirit projection could cross the one step to heaven line, but whether Lin Yi could successfully cast the imitation version of the primordial spirit projection. Even if it was just a simple imitation, even if the effect was only 1% or even 1,000th of the original, the difficulty of this was not trivial. One must know that the primordial spirit projection could only be successful by relying on a special formation, but now it was purely relying on Lin Yi himself. This level of difficulty was something that only Lin Yi himself could understand. One moment in reality, but to Lin Yi, it felt like a long time had passed. The next moment, an almost undetectable primordial spirit thread appeared on the other side of the formation, and it grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, slowly condensing into Lin Yi's silhouette. One step to heaven. Achieved. Boss, are we leaving? Qin Tian's voice came from behind. Lingshan and the others poked their heads out as well, all of them looking excited. While the battle between Lin Yi and Chenjiu didn't take much effort, and they didn't make much noise, it would be a lie to say that they didn't notice anything at all. They were training in isolation on the surface, but they were actually eavesdropping. Chapter 53-66. Okay. The crowd cheered and followed him. Dong, dong, dong. The deep sound of the ancient bell spread all over Mount Qingyun. All the people of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, from the elders in the Gold Core stage to the ordinary disciples, changed their faces when they heard the bell. They stopped what they were doing and quickly gathered in the main hall from all directions. Something big must happen when the Green Cloud bell rang. Everyone must gather as soon as possible. This was the rule of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. What happened? The group of pupils looked at each other. If there was no major change, the Green Cloud bell would not be easily rung. Could it be that something major had happened? Chenjiu and Lin Yi's personal negotiation was very secretive. Almost everyone was kept in the dark and didn't know what happened. Even Lu Pingon was very surprised. He didn't see the fight between Chenjiu and Lin Yi. In fact, when Chenjiu asked him to carry Chen Dongqing away, he had already left Dengtian Cliff first, so he didn't know what happened after that. It doesn't make sense. Master clearly said to deal with it coldly. Even if he killed Lin Yi, there is no need to ring the Green Cloud bell, right? Lu Pingon was confused. He still thought that Chenjiu could easily kill Lin Yi. After all, he was a real Yuanying realm-old monster. How could he lose to a primordial spirit of unknown origin? Lu Pingon didn't understand, and the others were even more confused. When they saw the figure standing on the side of the Green Cloud bell, they were even more surprised. Xinejia, what the hell are you doing? Lu Pingon suddenly frowned. The rest of the Gold Core stage seniors were also dissatisfied. The Green Cloud bell was not something that anyone could touch. At least, it had to be at the level of the deputy head. Xinejia, who was at the bottom of the ranking, was not qualified to touch it at all. If it was in the past, Xinejia would have been scared to the point that his legs were weak when he was surrounded by so many people. Today, although he was still a little nervous, he didn't panic at all. After all, he knew better than anyone that from today on, it was a new era of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I didn't do anything. Because there is an emergency, I rang the Green Cloud bell to gather everyone, Xinejia said calmly. Do you think you're qualified? Don't you think too highly of yourself? A golden core stage elder from the Chen clan snorted disdainfully. Exionegia, don't tell me you don't know the crime of ringing the emerald cloud bell without permission? Lu Pingon sneered, and then added, speaking of which, what kind of urgent matter could you have? Could it be that the archaic martial granduncle died? He had long believed that Lin Yi would die in Chenjia's hands, so Lu Pingon's words were much more unscrupulous than before. No way. Isn't that impostor imprisoned on the ascending heaven cliff? She can't just smash her head against the wall and die, right? The bystanders deliberately echoed. The higher-ups and disciples of other local sects looked at each other. Recently, Exionegia had been trying to rope them in, but there were only a few who responded. Apart from being afraid of the Grand Supreme Elder's power, there was another rumor that made them waver. That archaic martial granduncle seemed to be an impostor. Exionegia glanced at them, cleared his throat and said, as for whether archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi is an impostor, there will be no more suspense from today onwards. Oh, is it because he's dead? Lu Pingon curled his lips indifferently. In his eyes, Lin Yi was now a dead man. Everyone was looking at Exionegia, but he grinned and pointed to an empty space beside the green cloud bell. There was a piece of white cloth covering it, and there was a human figure under the white cloth. He's really dead. Lu Pingon was even more certain now. He believed that Lin Yi's body must be under the white cloth, because only a dead body could be taken out of the one-step to heaven matrix. You can say that. Exionegia smiled faintly, then faced the crowd and said, I think it's necessary to explain to everyone about what happened at the heaven cliff today. Elder Lu, you won't stop me from saying it, right? Humph, what's there to say? Lu Pingon snorted coldly. Not knowing the truth, he was still trying to keep a low profile. He changed the topic and said, speaking of which, Exionegia, you're quite bold. It's just the death of an impostor of unknown origin. How dare you ring the green cloud bell to gather all the disciples? How should you be punished? But Exionegia paused for a moment, then said with a smile, what if the person lying here is an archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi? What do you mean? Lu Pingon did not react for a moment. What I mean is, Exionegia suddenly moved forward and lifted the white cloth. When they saw the face of the person lying on the ground, everyone was shocked. As for Lu Pingon, his face turned pale and he almost fainted on the spot. Now that it's the Grand Supreme Elder who's in trouble, it shouldn't be too much for me to ring the green cloud bell, right? Exionegia said calmly. No one said anything, because they couldn't speak, because their jaws were on the floor. After a long time, Lu Pingon's stuttering voice was heard. How could this be? The person lying on the ground was not Lin Yi, but Chunjiu. How could this be? No way. Could it be that nascent soul realm old monsters from other sects are here? Those who did not know the reason were still shocked. In their minds, only nascent soul realm old monsters could defeat nascent soul realm old monsters, such as Bing Wuching from Snow Sword Sect who just left not long ago. No, the Grand Supreme Elder questioned the identity of archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi, so he was beaten up by archaic martial granduncle Lin Yi. It's as simple as that, Exionegia said lightly. After that, the whole place fell into dead silence again. The Grand Supreme Elder was beaten up? This would definitely be a big joke in the past, but at this moment, no one could laugh because Chenju was lying in front of them. This was an ironclad fact. Even so, the crowd still felt that the scene in front of them was too unbelievable. Could it be an illusion? Deceiving so many people with an illusion was undoubtedly a fantasy story, but killing Chenju, a nascent soul realm old monster, without making a sound was also a fantasy story. The credibility of the two was not much different to the crowd. Chapter 5367. Lu Pingon stared blankly at Chenjiu on the ground, as if he didn't feel anything. The other elders and disciples of the Qin family faction were also at a loss. Below Grand Elder Chenjiu, except for the deputy head Qindongqing, Lu Pingon's position was the highest. At this moment, even he was stunned, let alone the others. The silence of Lu Pingon and the others finally gave all the other elders and disciples a clear signal. They all showed strange excitement on their faces. This meant that the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island would usher in a new era from today. A new era was not good news for the Chen family faction, which had been used to being superior. But for the local faction, which had more people, it was undoubtedly a sign of a turnaround. Before this, they had all witnessed Xianjia's efforts to build momentum. However, the effect was negligible. After all, a primordial Grand Uncle Master of unknown origin could overpower Supreme Elder Changjio. Those who would believe in such a ridiculous story were basically out of their minds. But now, they finally knew that Xianjia was not brainless, but they were just frogs in a well. Xianjia took in everyone's expressions. To be honest, his legs were still trembling until just now. But now, after seeing everyone's different expressions, he suddenly felt at ease. Although the people of the Chen family faction were hostile, they were obviously stunned. They were like a group of dragons without a leader in a short period of time. It was destined that they would not make any big trouble. As for Lu Pingon, this guy wanted to raise his arm and call for help. Unfortunately, he was Chenjia's pro-disciple, but not a real member of the Chen family faction. This was a natural shackle that could not be overcome. He was still far from being able to call for help. As for the local faction, because there was no news from the head Hong Zijuan, they were now like a group of dragons without a leader. The key point was that they were not hostile to Lin Yi, who could overwhelm Grand Elder. At this moment, they were all full of awe. Even if there were a few people with ulterior motives, they dared not jump out to challenge Xianjia before they figured out the situation. It was the wisest choice to wait and see. Very well, now that times have changed, some untimely rules should be changed. The North Island Blue Cloud sect belongs to everyone. From now on, Green Cloud sect of North Island, which is not a single sect, can't put one sect first in everything. Everyone has to follow the rules, and there will be no privilege. Xianjia seized the opportunity and said. As soon as he said that, many of the disciples of the local sects immediately cheered. If one were to say who had suffered the most from the Chen family's faction, it would be none other than them. Although there were not many people in the Chen family faction, they relied on the huge halo of Grand Elder Changjio. Over the years, as long as it involved good things such as cultivation resources, they would receive preferential treatment without exception. They got the meat, and the disciples of other local factions got the soup. Sometimes they didn't even get the soup, so they didn't dare to say anything even though they were angry. Today, Xianjia called for the abolition of the privileges of the Chen family. This was undoubtedly a move to win the hearts of the people. It was simple, but extremely effective. I'd like to ask Elder Xian, which family do you mean by one? At this time, a voice suddenly interrupted the cheers of the crowd. Everyone's eyes suddenly focused on this person. After seeing the person clearly, Xianjia's pupils suddenly shrank. Chen Dongcheng. His primordial spirit had left his body for too long, so much so that his body had shown signs of atrophy. Normally, it would take at least a month for him to fully recover. It was a miracle that Chen Dongcheng could stand out at this time. Of course, it's the Chen family of North Island. Xianjia immediately responded tit for tat. Although he didn't have the slightest confidence to fight against Chen Dongqing, the deputy sect leader, now that Changjio was killed by Lin Yi, what else did he have to be afraid of? Everyone from the Qin family's faction heard it, right? Times have changed. Even a small character like this who doesn't even count as a fart wants to ride on top of our heads. Do you agree? Chen Dongqing sneered and took the lead to provoke in public. Hearing this, Xianjia panicked. The reason why these people in the Qin family faction gave up before was that they were collectively confused. The main reason was that no one took the lead. Now that Chen Dongqing suddenly appeared, the situation would definitely go out of control. As expected, when Chen Dongqing took the lead to provoke, the other people in the Chen family faction all changed their expressions. Although they were afraid of Lin Yi who could kill Chenjiao, the person standing in front of them was just a good guy in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, Xianjia. What was there to be afraid of? Hey, you guys have to think carefully. What I just said was personally ordered by Grandmaster Lin Yi. Are you sure you want to disobey him in public? Exionejia quickly brought up Lin Yi. Grandmaster Lin Yi, right? We're so scared. Chun Dongqing deliberately pretended to be frightened, but then he ridiculed, yes, I admit that your Grandmaster Lin Yi is indeed unfathomable, but is that useful? Come on, tell me, how is your Grandmaster Lin Yi going to get out of the sky-reaching formation? This was why Qin Dongqing was able to stand up and challenge them. That's right, they didn't dare to face Lin Yi now, but wasn't there still the one step to heaven matrix blocking them? Since Lin Yi couldn't come out, what was there to be afraid of? This? Exionejia choked for a moment. In fact, he had thought about this, but Lin Yi gave the order in a hurry, and he was too excited, so he neglected it. Hee hee, you can't be thinking that you can secretly get him an identity token without us knowing, right? Chun Dongqing sneered. It would not be difficult for Exionejia to get an identity token for Lin Yi if there was no leader just now. But now that he was the vice leader, nothing could be done. Chun Dongqing sneered. The Supreme Elder had fallen, and there was no news from the leader. The person with the highest position was Qin Dongqing, the deputy leader. Most importantly, he was not just a deputy leader in name only. He was the leader of the Qin clan. Unless Lin Yi came in person, the others could only bow their heads in front of him. Exionejia was depressed. It was hard to stabilize the situation, but he did not expect this guy to wake up halfway. What should he do? What? Weren't you in the limelight just now? Elder Exion, it's not appropriate for you to give up so soon, right? That granduncle Lin Yi of yours is still waiting for your good news at the Sky Cliff. It's not good to let him wait anxiously like this, right? Chun Dongqing ridiculed him again and again. The others looked at each other. Exionejia was really far behind Chun Dongqing. In just a few words, the other party had taken control of the situation. Chapter 5368. Especially in the current situation, if Exionejia directly confronted this guy, it would be a mess immediately. If these people from the Qin family really made a fuss, they might not listen to him even though there were many people in the local faction. Maybe they were waiting to see him make a fool of himself. The situation was getting out of control. At this time, a faint voice suddenly interrupted. Vice Leader Chun, who are you talking about? Qin Dongqing was still pretending to be calm, thinking that Lin Yi couldn't get out of the one-step to heaven formation, so he still had a chance to turn the situation around. At this time, after hearing this voice, his legs suddenly went soft, and he almost fell to the ground. You, how did you get out? Qin Dongqing looked at Lin Yi and his people who were slowly approaching, and he was instantly covered in a cold sweat. He was definitely the one who had the deepest experience of the fear of Lin Yi. The others were just shocked that Lin Yi could actually kill an old monster in the Gathering Vitality realm, but he was the only one who had experienced it personally. You're curious? Lin Yi smiled and glanced at the others who were just as shocked. He said casually, I even took care of your Grand Elder with ease. Do you really believe that a mere one-step to heaven formation can trap me? I didn't come out before because I was playing with you. Everyone fell silent. At this time, no one dared to look at Lin Yi, and this was the effect Lin Yi wanted. If he wanted to control the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, then what he had to do now was not to appease them, but to establish his power. From the moment Shinjio was killed, the rules of the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island were destined to be remade, and this person could only be Lin Yi. What are you guys doing? Greet Grandmaster. Exionejia took the opportunity to give everyone a wink. Greetings, Grandmaster. All the people present immediately knelt down, from the elders in the Gold Core stage to the ordinary disciples. No one was an exception, whether it was the local faction or the Chen family's faction. Even Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon, the two absolute henchmen of Chunjio, knelt down at this time. They had no choice. The situation was beyond their control. If they dared to disobey, Lin Yi absolutely wouldn't mind killing them again to warn others. Even Chunjio was killed, let alone the two of them. Lin Yi glanced at the two of them and felt a little pity in his heart. He really didn't intend to keep these two people. Although they weren't a threat to him, they were at the peak of the late stage of Jindan stage and the middle stage of Jindan stage. In addition, with the connections of the Qin family in the North Island, it would be more or less troublesome if they did something bad behind his back. It was a shame that the two were smart enough to stop causing trouble, not giving Linny an excuse to deal with them. They didn't give Linny an excuse to deal with them. Although he wanted to establish power and remake the rules, when there was no sufficient reason, even Linny couldn't kill people casually. That would make the whole Green Cloud sect of the North Island panic, and it wouldn't end well. Well, get up. Linny looked at the people kneeling on the ground. Thank you, Grandmaster. Everyone got up one after another, and all of them were in fear and trepidation. Today, Linny was a terrible existence above Chenjio, the highest elder. They were nervous and frightened even in front of Chenjio, and naturally, they were even more nervous now. The most important thing was that they didn't know what kind of temper Linny had. Was he kind and reasonable, or a bloodthirsty tyrant? If it was the former, it was good news for everyone, especially for the disciples of the local sections. But if it was the latter, it was hard to say whether it was a blessing or a curse. It was better to speak less before figuring out the situation. At this time, honest people wouldn't suffer losses. Let me tell you something. The North Island's Green Cloud sect is such a big sect that it can't be without a leader for a day. Now the highest elder is gone, and there's no news from the leader. We need someone to stand up and preside over the affairs. After all, I can't do it, can I? Linny said. Everyone looked at each other, and their eyes involuntarily fell on Chen Dongqing. Logically speaking, he was the most qualified candidate. Chen Dongqing suddenly felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He couldn't wait to hide now. What he feared most was being targeted by Linny. How could he dare to jump out and fight for power at this time? Even if he wanted to die, he shouldn't do it this way. Well, the position of the leader can't be left vacant. Let's take this opportunity to change the leader. I suggest Xianijia. Linny said directly. It was in the plan to let Xianijia preside over the affairs of the sect. Although it was a bit abrupt to bring it up rashly, and Xianijia's original status and strength were far from enough, with Linny's current deterrent power, who dared to say no? Sure enough, the crowd did not dare to oppose him directly. However, their expressions were a little strange. Although Xianijia was an elder in the Gold Core stage, it was like ascending to heaven in a single bound when an elder ranked at the bottom of the ranking suddenly became the sect leader. No one objects? Then it's settled. Linny did not want to talk nonsense with them at all. He simply made a decision. Anyway, with him suppressing them, no one dared to oppose. It would be fine when they got used to it. The crowd was speechless. The saying "the strong are respected" was true. No matter what decision Linny made, they would not dare to show it even if they were dissatisfied. Moreover, they were familiar with Xianijia's character. Although they were dissatisfied, it was not a bad thing for most of them to let such a good guy take the position. They could reluctantly accept it. Thank you, Granduncle Master. I will do my best and go through fire and water. Xianijia suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and shed tears of gratitude. It was true that he was a good man who put his own safety before things went awry, but he was also an ambitious one. Of course, he would never have dreamed that he would one day become the leader of the sect. However, ambition would grow. All right, then I'll leave the rest to you. If there's anything, look for me at Climbing Heaven Cliff. Linny did not stay any longer. He only needed to show his face in front of everyone today to shock them. As for how to deal with the aftermath, it was Xianijia's business. If Xianijia could not even handle this well, it would mean that he was in a difficult position and he would have to find someone else. As expected, Xianijia's performance did not disappoint Linny. Although his strength was only at the early stage of the Gold Core stage, this good guy's ability to handle affairs was not to be underestimated. In just a few days, he had calmed the restless people and successfully gained the support of some of the local leaders and disciples. Of course, there was still a long way to go before he could really control the overall situation. However, it was a very gratifying step for Xianijia. With the protection of Linny, he would become the real leader of Green Cloud sect in the North Island sooner or later. Chapter 5369. He had been missing for half a year. Before that, Xianijia hoped more than anyone else that the former head could come back to take charge of the situation. But now, everything was different. If Hong Zijuan came back, what should he do as the new head? Should he continue to be the head, or should he abdicate and return it to its rightful owner? If this matter was not handled well, the situation that Exionegia tried so hard to stabilize might be on the verge of losing control again. If the local factions split because of this, and the Qin family's faction fanned the flames again, things might get out of hand. The one who had the power to decide who should be the head was not the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, but Sky Climbing Cliff. Is this Hong Zijuan? Linny sized up the middle-aged man brought by Exionegia. His face was fair and beardless, and he looked honest and refined. His gestures occasionally revealed the aura of a superior, but it was not obvious. Instead, there was a hint of haggard and disheveled. "Greetings, Grand Uncle Master." Hong Zijuan hurriedly bowed to Lin Yi. He did not act like a head at all in front of Lin Yi. He was not a fool. Lin Yi even killed Chen Jiao, the highest elder, without hesitation, let alone a weak head like him. Most importantly, things were different now. Nominally, Exionegia had become the new head of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, and he was appointed by Lin Yi in public. It was a great risk for him to come back at this time. If Lin Yi and Exionegia felt that he was an eyesore, he would not end up well. Although Exionegia was a good person and Hong Zijuan had helped Exionegia before, it was about the head's position. Even brothers would fight to the death. Of course, the final decision was not up to him and Exionegia, but to Lin Yi. "You've been missing for so long. Where have you been?" Lin Yi looked at him and asked. "I'm ashamed to say that I've been hiding outside for the past half a year and dared not to come back. If I came back, I would be dead." Hong Zijuan smiled bitterly. "Why?" Lin Yi and Exionegia looked at each other. As the head of a sect, Hong Zijuan's strength was certainly not weak. He was a real master in the peak of Gold Core. Moreover, he was in the territory of Green Cloud sect on the North Island. How could his life be in danger? "That's because the person who wanted to kill me was Grand Elder Chunjiu. If it wasn't for my mount desperately protecting me and delaying me for a moment, I would have been a dead man." Hong Zijuan still had a lingering fear when he talked about this matter today. No one would have thought that his own sect's Grand Elder would actually directly make a move against his own sect's head, and there was only one purpose, which was to pave the way for Chen Dongqing. "No wonder we haven't heard from him for half a year." Lin Yi nodded. That made sense. Since Hong Zijuan had taken action, as long as Chen Jiao was there, Hong Zijuan wouldn't dare to come back to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. That would be courting death. That was why he suddenly showed up at this time. After all, Chen Jiao had been killed by Lin Yi. For him, the biggest threat had disappeared. As the head of a sect, it was impossible for him to wander outside all the time. No matter what, he had to return to Green Cloud sect in the North Island. As the head of a sect, I only cared about my own safety. It's a great dereliction of duty. Please punish me personally, Grand Uncle. Hong Zijuan respectfully took the initiative to ask for forgiveness, and his attitude was very proper. "It's not necessary. It's pardonable." Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently, but the way he looked at Hong Zijuan was a little more playful. This guy clearly knew that Lin Yi let Exionegia take his position, but from his attitude at this moment, he didn't complain or resent at all. Instead, he seemed to have accepted it. Of course, Hong Zijuan didn't have the guts to question Lin Yi. It wasn't hard to understand, but it was a little interesting that he took the initiative to ask for forgiveness with such a proper attitude. "Thank you for your understanding, Grand Uncle. But it's a fact that I haven't done anything in the past 6 months. As the head of a sect, I haven't been in contact with anyone for so long. I'm really not qualified to be the head of a sect, and I don't have the face to continue being the head of a sect. Therefore, this important task can only fall on the shoulders of sect leader Xian. Don't worry, Grand Uncle. I'll do my best to cooperate with you and Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I'll go through fire and water to protect you." Hong Zijuan hurriedly showed his loyalty. This guy was quite smart. Lin Yi suddenly understood why Hong Zijuan came. He knew that the matter was settled, and he didn't want to get himself killed for a sect leader's position that had already become a castle in the air. Therefore, he took the initiative to clarify himself. Apart from other things, this guy really knew how to adapt to circumstances. "If that's the case, then how about this? You can be the vice head from now on. You have experience and strength. We still need your help on Xionegia's side in the future. I hope there will be no more factional disputes in Green Cloud Sect in the North Island. I don't want to hear about anyone stirring up trouble. I have high hopes for both of you. Don't let me down. Linny looked at the two of them and said, yes. Both of them were overjoyed. Xionegia was overjoyed because he had truly secured the position of the head. As for Hong Zijuan, it was already a great thing for him to get Lin Yi's approval. Moreover, although he lost the position of the head, at least he could be the vice head. This was already a pleasant surprise, and there was nothing to be dissatisfied about. Back then, he was bullied so miserably by Chenjiu. This in itself had already proved that Hong Zijuan wasn't a tough person. If Chenjiu didn't want his life, he would have chosen to swallow his anger. Now that it was Linny who was even more terrifying, his choice to lower his head seemed unexpected, but in fact, it was completely reasonable. Very good. Linny smiled. He had no choice but to push Xionegia into the position of the head, because he was only familiar with Xionegia and the whole Green Cloud sect in the North Island. He wouldn't rest assured if someone else took the position. However, it was a little unrealistic for Xionegia to really control the overall situation in a short period of time. Hong Zijuan came at the right time. By the way, Marshal Granduncle, there's one more thing I need to report to you. Xionegia paused and said with a bit of shame, Chun Dongqing and Lu Pingon both ran away, and they took Chenjiu's body with them. Now Chenjiu's primordial spirit had been trapped in the space of the jade pendant by Lin Yi, and the rest of his body was no different from a corpse to others. Got it. Lin Yi didn't comment on this. In his opinion, it wasn't entirely a bad thing. After all, Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon were more or less hidden dangers in the sect. As long as they were there, the Qin family's faction wouldn't completely disperse, and the fight between the factions would continue. However, once the two of them left, the Qin family's faction would be completely leaderless, and it would collapse on its own. Chapter 5370. Xionegia was a little worried at first, afraid that he would be punished for not doing his job well, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to be like this. He breathed out in relief. All right, you guys go. The most important thing right now is to take control of the big picture. Lin Yi waved his hand. Yes. Xionegia and Hong Zijuan immediately left with high spirits. Heh, fate really is messing with people. These two used to be Hong Zijuan's boss, but now he's going to be Xionegia's lackey, and he's still accepting it so calmly. His personality is amazing. Chuntian and the others laughed. Birds of a feather flock together. They're actually the same kind of people. Their personalities are soft, and they look like good people who only care about their own safety, but they're ambitious as well. They'll only jump out and bite people when they're cornered. Now that Linny bro has accepted them, of course, Hong Zijuan won't go looking for trouble. Ziyu said with a face that could see through people. Face isn't important, life is more important, Lingshan nodded. Linny couldn't help but laugh. You guys are quite good at reading people. All right, stop slacking off here, go train hard. All right, the group smiled. If it was their original temperament, they wouldn't have trained so diligently. However, Chenjiu and the others had given them a direct lesson. If they weren't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to move an inch in this small world. They were all ambitious people, and they didn't want to live under Lin Yi's wings forever. After all, even if they couldn't keep up with Lin Yi's footsteps, they couldn't be a burden to Lin Yi. Central Island, Luo Mountain. Since there were no sects stationed here, and there were wild spirit beasts, there were very few people within 10 miles. Unless it was some sect training or something like that, this place was basically a no-man's land. A giant eagle descended from the sky. This was the most symbolic flying spirit beast of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It was a rare ferocious bird even in the small primitive Jianghu. Except for the sect leader, only the highest elder with a higher status could control it. On the back of this giant vulture was none other than Qin Dongqing, Lu Pingon, and the unconscious Grand Supreme Elder Chenjiu, who had secretly escaped. Since he chose to sneak out of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, in essence, it was no different from betraying the sect. In this way, it was clear that they couldn't stay on the North Island any longer. The other islands were too far away, and they weren't very familiar with them. Chen Dongqing and Lu Pingon discussed for a long time and finally decided to escape to the middle island. The ungoverned Ke Luo Mountain was a ready-made foothold. Although the Ke Luo Mountain was dangerous, however, one of them was at the peak of the late stage of the Golden Core Realm, while the other was at the middle stage of the Golden Core Realm. As long as they were a little more cautious, they would be able to protect themselves. Old Lu, we have to figure out what to do next. After all, we can't really stay in this ravine all the time, right? Chen Dongqing frowned. He was from the Qin family of the North Island and had always been regarded as the successor. He was used to living in luxury since he was a child. Now he was forced to escape to the Ke Luo Mountain. It was okay for a day or two, but he couldn't endure it for a long time. But now the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island has fallen into the hands of Lin Yi. Both of us may have been accused of betraying the sect now. If we go out rashly and are targeted by people with ulterior motives, we'll be in big trouble. Lu Pingon also had a headache. No one would want to stay in this barren land. But the problem was that betraying the sect was a first-class felony in the small primitive Jianghu. Even if they walked out of the Middle Island, they would be beaten by everyone. What if they were encountered by the sects of the Middle Island that were on good terms with the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? The consequences would be even more unimaginable. We still have to give it a try. We can't go on like this. If we really waste a few months, we won't be able to do anything. If it really takes a few months, just the cultivation resources for the two of us will be a big problem. Chen Dongqing shook his head. If it was an ordinary master of the foundation establishment stage, it would be possible to get some cultivation resources. But both of them were masters above the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. Almost all the cultivation resources of the Gold Core stage in the small primitive Jianghu were in the hands of various sects and families. Not to mention the sparsely populated Ke Luo Mountain, it was difficult to buy them in the market. The path of cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. After a long time, the strength of the two of them would inevitably decline, and then they would not be able to find peace even if they cried. How about? Lu Pingon pondered for a moment and suggested, let's simply go to another sect. With our strength, I believe that any of the primitive sects will be happy to accept us. At that time, we can spread the story of Lin Yi occupying the Magpie's Nest, which will inevitably attract the attention of the entire Primordial Alliance, and we will be in an invincible position. That sounds like a good idea. Chen Dongqing nodded in agreement. He was a master at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm, and Lu Pingon was a master at the peak of the late stage of the Gold Core realm. With such strength, if they went to any of the primitive sects, they would be treated well. Of course, the premise was that they could gain the trust of the other party. Fortunately, over the years, in order to help him rise, Chanjiu often took him to various primitive sects to show his face. Among them, there were a few who were on good terms, so it should not be a big problem to go and seek refuge. So, let's go now? Lu Pingon looked at Chen Dongqing. Although his strength was higher, he still humbled himself in front of Chen Dongqing. After all, Chanjiu was not really dead. If they could find a way to cure him, they would not have a hard time with the protection of this Yuanying realm-old monster. There is one more question. What about my ancestor? We can't just go and seek refuge behind his back, can we? Chen Dongqing was still frowning. Chanjiu was the greatest hope for him and Lu Pingon to turn things around. Unless it was confirmed that he was completely dead, it would be impossible to abandon him. Right now, how to settle him was a big problem. That's definitely not appropriate. Master's identity and strength are too sensitive. If we take him rashly, not to mention that few people dare to take us in, even if they do, it will inevitably give birth to all kinds of dirty ideas, which is not good. Lu Pingon shook his head. After all, if they really saved him, he would be a real Yuanying realm-old monster. The Blue Cloud sect of the North Island had already staged a dove occupying a magpie's nest, and other primitive sects would not repeat the same mistake. In this case, we can only divide into two groups. One of us will go first, and the other will stay to take care of the ancestor. When everything is ready over there, we will find a way to secretly transfer the ancestor there. How about that? Chen Dongqing said. That's a way, but who will go and who will stay? Lu Pingon looked at Qin Dongqing. This was another problem. Although the two of them were now grasshoppers on the same rope, they could not be considered as confiding in each other. They did not know what kind of little schemes they had in their bellies. No matter who went and who stayed, there would always be various concerns. Chapter 53-71. Just then, a strange voice suddenly cut in. You two don't have to worry. As long as you join us, all your worries will not be a problem. Who's that? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon were shocked at the same time. Only then did they see several figures in the dense forest not far away. All of them were shrouded in black robes, looking extremely mysterious. Seeing this scene, the two of them suddenly felt their blood run cold. Although they were not nascent soul-old monsters, their strength was not low. They did not expect that they would unknowingly fall into the encirclement of these people. It was incredible. Hee, you can call me Mysterious Man. The black-robed man's tone was profound. If Bing Wuqing was here, she would know that this guy was the bespectacled professor. Mysterious Man? What do you want? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon looked at each other, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The other party had concealed themselves very well. They could not see their strength for a while, but they were sure that since these people could surround the two of them without anyone noticing, their strength was definitely not weak. Nothing. Since you've come to our territory, as the host, we should come over and say hello, shouldn't we? The bespectacled professor smiled. Host? The two of them could not help but be stunned. The reason why they chose the Luo Mountain in the Middle Island as their first stop was because it was an ownerless land. Otherwise, they would not have rashly come in. When did such a group of mysterious hosts appear? We haven't been here for long, so it's normal that you haven't heard of us. After all, you're guests from the North Island, thousands of miles away. The bespectacled professor looked at the two's surprised expressions and became more and more playful. How do you know we're from the North Island? Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon were shocked again. They had just missed the mention of the blue cloud, sect from the North Island when they were talking just now. They did not say anything else at all. Could it be that these people had been guarding here from the beginning? Not only do I know that you're from the North Island, but I also know your identity. Qin Dongqing, the deputy leader of the Blue Cloud sect from the North Island, Elder Lu Pingon, and the one on the ground is Highest Elder Chenjiu. Am I right? The bespectacled professor smiled. Who on earth are you? The two of them were even more shocked. Didn't I say it just now? You can call me Mysterious Man. The bespectacled doctor paused and then said, both of you are the victims of Lin Yi, and Lin Yi happens to be our enemy. It must be fate that you came all the way here to seek refuge. What? Do you also have a grudge with Lin Yi? The two of them were dumbfounded. They thought to themselves, what kind of people does Lin Yi have? He even has enemies in this godforsaken place. What a coincidence. Of course. Allow me to ask, do the two of you want to seek revenge on Lin Yi? Asked the bespectacled doctor. Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon looked at each other. Although they were full of fear towards the mysterious man in front of them, they still said truthfully, of course we want to, but we don't have the strength to do so. It's good that you have the heart. As for strength, as long as the two of you are willing to join us, you will soon have it, the bespectacled doctor persuaded. Join you? What do you mean? The two of them looked at each other. Until now, they were not even clear whether they were enemies or friends. How did they get to this point? The meaning is very clear. If the two of you join us, I can make you become old monsters in the Yuanying realm in a very short time. What do you think? The bespectacled doctor's words were shocking. Old monsters in the Yuanying realm. Hearing these words, Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon were completely shocked. When they came to their senses, they looked at each other as if they were looking at a monster. Was this guy's brain fried? Old monsters in the Yuanying realm were existences that could only be encountered by chance. With their qualifications, especially Qin Dongqing, even if they were given a few hundred years, they would not be able to reach the threshold. You don't believe me? That's simple. Anyway, you have come here. Just stay and have a look. It won't be long before you understand that what I said is true. The bespectacled doctor suddenly threw 2 elixirs to the two of them and said, This is a gift for you too. Golden elixir? This was Chen Dongqing and Lu Pinggan's first reaction, but then they shook their heads and denied it. This was definitely not a golden elixir. It just looked a little similar at first glance. Of course, it is not an ordinary golden elixir, but a special improved version. As for the effect, it is at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. The bespectacled doctor laughed. The two of them listened with bright eyes, but after all, they did not know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend. This elixir did not feel ordinary. From the appearance alone, it was even far above an ordinary golden elixir. However, who knew if it was poison? You still don't believe me? It's okay. There should be a way to test elixirs in this small ancient world. If you two are worried, you can go out and find someone to test it. I can wait. The bespectacled doctor loosened the reins. Thank you very much. Chen Dongqing and Lu Pinggan nodded quickly. At this moment, their minds were completely focused on the elixir. They could not wait. After the bespectacled doctor left with his people, the two of them did not hesitate to go out on the vultures to find someone to test the elixir. Soon, the results came out. Although it was impossible to accurately identify what elixir it was certain that there was no poison in the 2 elixirs. They were very clean. This result was somewhat unexpected, but at the same time, it made the two of them overjoyed. Since it was not poison, it meant that there was no danger. In turn, it confirmed the mysterious man's words to a certain extent. The effect of this elixir was at least 5 times more than an ordinary golden elixir. Was this possible? Both of them had a bit of luck in their hearts. If this was the case, then they would be rich. They did not hesitate to find a place to start taking the elixir. 3 days later, the two of them rode the vultures back to Luo Mountain. Sure enough, the bespectacled doctor was already waiting here with his people. How is it? Are you satisfied with the effect of the elixir? The bespectacled doctor smiled. Chen Dongqing and Lu Pinggan did not speak, but the momentum shown by the two of them at this moment was enough to explain everything. They were both in the golden elixir great perfection. In just 3 days, Lu Pinggan broke through from the peak of the golden elixir late stage to the golden elixir great perfection was understandable, but Chen Dongqing broke through from the golden elixir middle stage to the golden elixir great perfection, which was really incredible. Looking at the two of you, you should have discovered it, right? The bespectacled doctor continued to smile. It would take dozens or hundreds of years for others to go from the early stage of the gold core stage to the great perfection of the gold core stage, but for Long, even if she did not use the improved version of the elixirs with great side effects, it would not take that long. Perhaps in a few years, the Snow Sword School would have another great perfection of the gold core stage. However, before the master and disciple could have a few words, a familiar yet disgusting voice cut in. It was Shui Jianfeng. Yo, you've finally come out of isolation. It looks like you're already in the gold core stage. How rare. Shui Jianfeng walked towards the two with an evil smile on his face. It was obvious that he did not come with good intentions. Long and her master, Su Xiaodong, looked at each other and could not help but feel a little surprised. Ever since this fellow's legs were destroyed by Bing Wuqing in public, not long after that, his father, Shui Liping, sent him out to seek medical treatment. There was no news of him for a few months. They did not expect him to appear again today. There was something strange about this matter from the beginning. Logically speaking, with the injuries on his legs, the doctors in the Snow Sword School might be able to cure him. Even if they did not have the ability, they could at least give it a try. There was no need for him to go out to seek medical treatment, let alone stay out for a few months. Seeing that Long and Su Xiaodong did not speak, Shui Jianfeng did not mind. He walked closer and reached out his hand to touch Long's cheek. He continued with an evil smile. TSK, I haven't seen you for a few months. Junior sister, you've become more and more attractive. I can't help but feel sorry for you. Initially, I wanted to continue to pursue your past deeds, but I've changed my mind now. As long as you repent and mend your ways, I can let bygones be bygones. How about that? Repent and mend my ways? Long took a step back and avoided his lecherous hand. She had already advanced into the gold core stage. Even if she was only in the early stage of the gold core stage, she was at least at the same level as the other party. She would definitely not be able to defeat him, but she would not be helpless to the extent that she could only wait for death. Chapter 53-73. Lung Long frowned and immediately prepared to use the ice prison mirror. The power of this move was enough to threaten beginner Golden Elixir Realm experts when she was in foundation building consummation. Now that she had advanced to beginner Golden Elixir Realm, its power had increased tenfold, or even tenfold. It was enough to threaten any Golden Elixir Realm experts, including those in Gold Elixir Realm consummation, especially since this was the Snow Sword faction, where she did not need to deal with Xue Jianfeng alone. Once they started fighting, they would quickly attract onlookers, and if things got out of hand, it would no longer be her problem. However, before Long Long could make her move, a bone-chilling coldness had already enveloped Xue Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's voice followed. "Who are you talking about when you don't know what's good for you?" "I knew it. When Long Long is in trouble, you, Lin Yi's damned lackey, would definitely jump out and bare your teeth." Hee, I was right. Not only was Xue Jianfeng not shocked, but the corner of his mouth curled into a smug and mocking smile, as if he had forgotten the painful lesson from last time. "So you're saying that you came prepared?" Bing Wuqing looked at him again. Although he did not make a move, nor did he release any terrifying aura, her intuition told her that he was no longer the same as before. Thinking of the few months that he had disappeared, anything was possible with the nature-defying skills of the core. Maybe he had already advanced to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, with Xue Jianfeng's character of bullying the weak, he would never dare to come back to pick a fight at this time, and in such an open and above-board way. Thinking of this, Bing Wuqing suddenly understood. Provoking Long Long to lure her out on purpose. Could it be that this guy wanted to seek revenge on her? What do you think? Xue Jianfeng did not hide it, and a ferocious look flashed across his eyes. "Someone asked me to bring you a message. There is a price to pay for betrayal, and traitors will never have a good ending. I hope you are mentally prepared. Is that so?" Bing Wuqing's expression did not change at all. It was needless to say who the person he was talking about was. From the day he attacked Xue Jianfeng, she had already been prepared for this. She was not afraid at all. It was true that the center was unfathomable, but did that mean that Lin Yi was weak? The fact that the higher-ups in the center had repeatedly instructed their subordinates not to provoke Lin Yi was proof of Lin Yi's fearsomeness. Bing Wuqing believed that Lin Yi and his backer must have the profound strength to contend with the center. This was the most logical explanation. Otherwise, he would not have joined Lin Yi's side so easily. This was a huge gamble, and a smart person like him would not bet easily. "You seem to be fearless. Do you really think that you're invincible just because you've become a nascent soul cultivator? Do you think that no one can deal with you?" Looking at his expression, Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Bing Wuqing as if he was looking at a clown who was about to be avenged by him. "So what you're trying to say is that you can deal with me?" Bing Wuqing's lips curled into a grin. "Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't all my saliva have been wasted?" Xue Jianfeng's expression became more and more smug. However, before he could make a move, his body suddenly sank. A thick layer of ice suddenly covered his entire body. Not only was it difficult for him to move, but it was also impossible for him to even lift his hand. The merciless ice aura this time was much more powerful than before. Bing Wuqing's cultivation level had not improved in the past few months, and she had not taken the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent gathering pills that Lin Yi had given her. Everyone knew that more haste, less speed. However, some people could restrain themselves, while others could not. Bing Wuqing, who was an absolutely rational person, naturally belonged to the former category. In terms of direct effects alone, apart from the poisonous gas, the improved version of the core elixir was indeed much more powerful than ordinary elixirs. Even the supreme-grade elixirs that Lin Yi had personally refined could not compare to it. However, there was a huge drawback, and that was that it greatly depleted one's potential. The direct consequence of this was that it would be very difficult for one to achieve breakthroughs in the future, and one's foundation would be severely lacking. Although Bing Wuqing didn't rely on the core elixir to increase her strength like Shui Jianfeng, she had still taken it once. If it weren't for the fact that her natural endowment was so strong that it defied the natural order, no matter how many supreme-grade elixirs Linny gave her, it would have been useless. To be honest, the fact that she was able to overcome the side effects of the core elixir in such a short period of time and successfully break through to the nascent soul realm was a result that shocked not only the outsiders, but even Lin Yi himself. However, no matter how strong and heaven-defying Bing Wuqing's natural endowments were, the side effects still existed. This was not obvious when she was in the nascent soul realm, but it gradually became apparent after she advanced to the nascent soul realm. The most direct manifestation was that it was no longer as easy to achieve breakthroughs as before. With her natural endowments, she could easily achieve breakthroughs with just a few elixirs in the past, but it was not realistic now. Of course, part of the reason was that it was more difficult to achieve breakthroughs in the nascent soul realm, but the side effects were still there. Fortunately, she had that half a stalk of divine knowledge grass as a foundation, which largely mitigated this side effect. Now that she had specially stabilized it for a few months, it could basically be considered to have offset the side effects. As her strength and realm became more stable, even though they were both in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, Bing Wuqing's real strength had increased a lot compared to a few months ago. Even if she were to face a more experienced early-stage nascent soul expert of the same level, she would only be stronger. Therefore, Shui Jianfeng was very confident when he returned this time. Bing Wuqing, who had expected this, was also very confident. Humph! With such insignificant skills, you have the nerve to repeat the same trick in front of me? Shui Jianfeng, who was trapped in the ice, suddenly snorted coldly. An extremely powerful burst of vital energy erupted from his body, and the ice instantly shattered to the ground. There was no longer any obstruction. Seeing this, the expressionless Bing Wuqing's eyes suddenly widened. This guy was not in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, but the peak of the early stage. Are you scared? Shui Jianfeng was very pleased with her shocked expression. He said proudly, "How about it? Do you feel a little regretful now? Unfortunately, even if you regret it, it's too late. Once you took this step, there's no turning back. To be honest, I really didn't expect that a rational person like you, Bing Wuqing, would be so hot-headed that you would actually take this path of no return. Before I really make a move, why don't you share your thoughts?" The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was his greatest source of confidence. In these few months, he wasn't recuperating from his injuries. Instead, he was undergoing further strengthening and upgrading. The peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm was the result of this strengthening and upgrading. Chapter 5374. However, the key that restricted them was the sample. Not only did they need a ready-made sample source, but they also needed a strong sample recipient. In the beginning, the strongest sample in the secular world was a heaven-level paragon, so the center of the secular world could only produce heaven-level paragon experts. However, when the people of the ancient underworld appeared, Foundation Establishment and Golden Core experts were no longer a problem. Now that Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon had brought the half-dead Chenjiu, it was only natural that they could produce nascent soul experts. Shui Jianfeng was the first test subject. As for why he could reach the peak of early-stage nascent soul, there was only one reason. Chenjiu, who was the sample source, was at the peak of early-stage nascent soul. Path of no return? Looks like you're really confident. Bing Wuqing's eyes narrowed into slits. This was a sign that he was serious. No matter how much he looked down on Shui Jianfeng, now that he had become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, he was definitely a formidable opponent. I'm a whole level stronger than you now. Why don't you give me a reason not to be confident? Shui Jianfeng grinned coldly and suddenly drew his sword. The speed of his sword was more than 100 times faster than when he was at Golden Core Paragon. At first glance, it looked like a beam of cold light, and in the next instant, it was already at Bing Wuqing's throat. No one could have imagined that Shui Jianfeng would so openly kill Bing Wuqing in broad daylight. One must know that even when Bing Wuqing had seized the opportunity to turn against him previously, it was only to punish him. This fellow was a classic example of a vile person who would seek revenge whenever he had a grudge. Cold and Su Xiaodong's eyelids twitched at the sight, and they immediately broke out in cold sweat for Bing Wuqing. However, this was a battle between nascent soul experts, and they were only at the early stage golden core experts, so they could not interfere at all. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng's sword stopped at the last moment. It was not that he had deliberately withdrawn his strength, but that there was an additional layer of ice between the tip of his sword and Bing Wuqing's throat. What was different was that this layer of ice was an eerie black clang. With a crisp sound similar to metal colliding, Xue Jianfeng's sword was deflected by this layer of black ice, which shocked the arrogant Xue Jianfeng. He was now a peak, early-stage nascent soul expert. How could he not break the defense of an early-stage nascent soul expert when he went all out? Especially when this layer of black ice appeared. It made people's hair stand on end. What kind of evil technique was this? Your level has indeed increased by quite a bit, but unfortunately, your strength has not increased by much. Your sword is a bit unsteady, Bing Wuqing said calmly. Not only was there not the slightest hint of panic in her expression, it was as if she had seen through her opponent's background with this sword strike and regained her confidence. Xue Jianfeng's attack was indeed fast, so fast that he couldn't even react in time. However, the tip of the sword began to drift in the end. This was a sign of an unstable realm and insufficient foundation. No matter how nature-defying the technique was, it was not surprising that Xue Jianfeng would suffer from this after forcefully turning him into an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm in such a short period of time. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Bing Wuqing to block his sudden attack. Humph! Stop putting on an act. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng began to feel a little diffident. All this while, Bing Wuqing had always been superior to him. Even though she was superior to him now, he actually did not have much confidence. After all, he was not a fool. He knew better than anyone the drawbacks of the improved elixirs, especially when he had just become an expert at the peak early-stage nascent soul realm. Against Bing Wuqing, an expert at the early-stage nascent soul realm, there was a risk that he would fail miserably. At the end of the day, Xue Jianfeng would always feel inferior in front of a true peerless genius like Bing Wuqing. It was just that he was deceiving himself and refused to admit it no matter what. Whether I'm putting on airs or not, we'll know once we fight. Bing Wuqing's tone was very unyielding. Unlike the shock she had shown just now, the way she looked at Xue Jianfeng now was filled with aggression, just like how a vicious wolf would look at an injured leopard. Before the leopard was injured, the vicious wolf might have retreated, but now that it had seen through the leopard, the tables had turned. Being stared at like that, Xue Jianfeng felt his scalp go numb for a moment, and he even took half a step back subconsciously. However, he quickly regained his senses and forced a cold laugh. "Humph, you sure sound arrogant. Let's see if you have what it takes." Bing Wuqing did not speak, but answered him with her actions. A pitch-black ice sword appeared soundlessly in her hand, emitting an unparalleled mysterious aura. It seemed sacred and solemn, yet evil and ruthless at the same time. It was hard to fathom, but it made one's heart palpitate. Xue Jianfeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. Black ice again. Before today, he had never seen such a move from Bing Wuqing. Judging from the situation just now, this was obviously her trump card, and its power must be extraordinary. Just as they were about to fight, a group of people hurried over from afar, and Hong Qingyuan's voice rang out. "Wait, let's talk this out." It was not just sect leader Hong Qingyuan who had come. Great Elder Qi Qianqiu and the other members of the Elders Guild had arrived as well. Chapter 5375. Hong Qingyuan and the others looked at each other. Last time, Bing Wuqing had taken matters into her own hands and got herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder, and they hadn't even had the time to report it to the Great Supreme Elder. Now, she had gotten herself a permanent Great Supreme Elder. What the hell was this? Although they criticized her in their hearts, she was now an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. They, including Hong Qingyuan, had no room to bargain. No matter what she asked, The only thing they could do was to listen obediently. All right, it's settled then. Xue Jianfeng made his decision. Hong Qingyuan and the others all looked at Bing Wuqing. He was the only one who had the right to speak up and object at a time like this. Xue Jianfeng, the first executive Grand Supreme Elder, was obviously trying to ride on his head. The one who had the biggest reaction to this was definitely him. However, Bing Wuqing was completely indifferent. She didn't even have the intention to speak. She just looked at Xue Jianfeng with a sneer in her eyes, as if she wasn't interested. Soon, Xue Jianfeng, Hong Qingyuan, and the others left one after another. When they were far away, Bing Wuqing turned to Long Long and reminded, based on this guy's character, he won't let this go easily. Be careful for the next few days, and avoid him if you can. Got it. Long Long nodded. Because she had just advanced to the Golden Core realm, she needed to stabilize her realm. She just needed to find a slightly more secluded place. Moreover, with Bing Wuqing as a deterrent, Xue Jianfeng didn't dare to be too unbridled. Little did he know that Bing Wuqing herself was feeling very weak at this moment. Although she looked like she was going to defeat Xue Jianfeng, it was actually just a bluff. The sudden appearance of Hong Qingyuan and the others was not so much to give Xue Jianfeng a way out, but to say that it had helped him out of his predicament. The black ice that Xue Jianfeng was most afraid of was indeed a killer weapon that he had recently cultivated. Unfortunately, it was far from being fully formed. Its effect in actual combat was very limited, which could not be concealed once they started fighting. Fortunately, Xue Jianfeng was frightened. Bing Wuqing had originally planned to continue stabilizing her realm for a while, but now she couldn't. Facing Xue Jianfeng, a peak early nascent soul realm expert who had suddenly appeared, she had to improve her strength as soon as possible. She was very clear that Xue Jianfeng wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. He might be able to scare them this time, but he might not be able to do so the next time. Fortunately, she still had the 2 supreme-grade golden nascent condensation pills that Linny had given her. In addition, she had been stabilizing herself during this period of time. As long as she went into seclusion for a period of time, Bing Wuqing was confident that she could elevate her realm by 1 level. If she was lucky, she might even elevate 2 levels in a row. At that time, he would have enough strength to use the black cold ice. Xue Jianfeng would naturally not be a threat to him. Bing Wuqing was never one to procrastinate. Once she had made up her mind, she immediately went into seclusion. For 3 consecutive days, everything was peaceful. However, this peace was soon broken. Xue Jianfeng took much earlier than Bing Wuqing had expected, and he did not manage to see through the black ice. But he could tell that Bing Wuqing was putting on an act. Otherwise, with Bing Wuqing's extremely pragmatic nature, as long as she had enough power, she would not have swallowed her pride like this. Especially when he realized that Long Long had disappeared without a trace and Bing Wuqing had gone into closed-door cultivation. Xue Jianfeng felt even more strongly that he had been tricked. His first reaction in anger and humiliation was to barge into Bing Wuqing's cave abode. Anyone who went into closed-door cultivation would activate a defensive formation to prevent outsiders from invading, and Bing Wuqing's cave abode was no exception. Unfortunately, the defensive formation here was not of a high level. At most, it could withstand the attack of a golden core perfected expert. In front of a nascent soul-old monster, it was practically non-existent, let alone Xue Jianfeng. Xue Jianfeng's sudden barge was far beyond Bing Wuqing's expectations. He was at a crucial point in his closed-door cultivation. He had suffered a great loss in just one encounter. If he had not barely released the Heartless Ice Force at the last moment to delay the other party for a moment, he would have been killed instantly. Otherwise, he would practically be killed in an instant. This time, Xue Jianfeng had truly unleashed his killing intent. However, Bing Wuqing was Bing Wuqing after all. Even though she had been viciously tricked by Xue Jianfeng, she was still able to escape death by herself and escape with serious injuries. The Snow Sword School was in an uproar when the news came out. Hong Qingyuan and the others almost went crazy when they heard about it. Many of them were people who prioritized the interests of the school above everything else. Before this, they were all looking forward to a glorious future. Xue Jianfeng, Bing Wuqing, and the original Grand Supreme Elder made up a total of 3 nascent soul-old monsters. Such a luxurious top-notch configuration had already surpassed the level of all the 10 small sects and families. They could even begin to challenge the legendary 4 big sects, which were the true supreme rulers of the ancient underworld. Once they became one of the 4 big sects and families, it would be a brand new era for the entire Snow Sword School. They were about to make history. Little did they expect that before they could realize this beautiful dream, Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing would start fighting again. This time, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured, so much so that she finally escaped from the Snow Sword School with all her might. Her whereabouts were unknown. Elder Xue, can you please explain to us what is going on? Hong Qingyuan asked, suppressing his anger. If the other party was not a nascent soul-old monster, he would not even want to speak right now. He would have been punished according to the school rules. Unfortunately, all the school rules were set for those below the sect leader. For a nascent soul-old monster like Xue Jianfeng, all the school rules were nothing but a fart. What is going on? Do you even need to ask? Bing Wuqing betrayed the school. It's that simple. Because of his strength, Xue Jianfeng no longer cared about Hong Qingyuan and the others. He did not even bother to make up an excuse for this kind of thing. He could deal with it with just a few words. Hong Qingyuan and the others all had a strange expression, as if they were constipated. Even if 10,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts, they would not dare to refute him directly. Also, where did Cold go? Find her at all costs. Xue Jianfeng directly ordered everyone, then added, spread the word. If I don't see her by sunset today, then I will punish her master, Su Xiaodong. His words caused the expressions of Hong Qingyuan and the others to change drastically again. Not only did they not feel the joy brought about by 3 nascent soul-old monsters, but they were all anxious. Xue Jianfeng was acting so unbridled. He was prepared to become the local tyrant of the entire Snow Sword School. Chapter 5376. Under Xue Jianfeng's tyrannical power, everyone, from sect leader Hong Qingyuan to ordinary Snow Sword sect disciples, could only look at each other in silence. Su Xiaodong was captured and tied to the execution platform in public. The result was not out of Xue Jianfeng's expectations. Lung Long, who had disappeared after hearing that her master was in trouble, appeared before the sky turned dark. I'm here. Can you let go of my master now? Lung Long looked straight at Xue Jianfeng on the platform. Haha, the relationship between master and disciple is really touching. But when did I say that I would let go of your master if you came? Xue Jianfeng smiled evilly. What do you want? Lung Long was not surprised. Nothing much. Even if I told you to give in right now, I don't think you'd agree to it. But it's fine. I'm patient. You'll understand when Lin Yi's unlucky, and I won't have to say anything then. Xue Jianfeng looked very confident, and then sneered. What you have to do now is very simple. Stand with your master. If Bing Wuqing still remembers the mission Lin Yi gave her, I think she'll show herself. Compared to Long Long, Xue Jianfeng paid more attention to Bing Wuqing. After all, she was the one who could really pose a fatal threat to him. Now that he had managed to seriously injure her, he had to take this opportunity to eliminate her. Lung Long was nothing in comparison. Although that was what he said, Xue Jianfeng had no idea whether Bing Wuqing would show up or not. He knew very well that she was an extremely rational and realistic person. Since she knew that she would be courting death by coming back, the possibility of her showing up on her own was really not high. The result was out of Xue Jianfeng's expectation. Bing Wuqing appeared before his patience had even begun to wear off. How rare! How rare! I didn't think that a cold-faced guy like you would be so loyal to Lin Yi, coming back to die for his woman. Should I say that you're noble, or should I say that you're stupid? Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but be overjoyed. Lung Long was also very surprised by this. Although she already knew that Bing Wuqing was one of them, there was not much substantial interaction between them. She never knew that Bing Wuqing's loyalty to Lin Yi was to such an extent. It was truly impressive. I'm not noble or stupid, Bing Wuqing answered. Oh? Why did you come back when it was clearly a suicide mission? Don't tell me you think you can escape alive? Xue Jianfeng did not hide his murderous intent at all. Now that Bing Wuqing was severely injured, No one else from the Snow Sword faction dared to stop him. Today was the day Bing Wuqing would die.
Yes.
Bing Wuqing's answer was short and forceful. Interesting. Let's give it a try. The corners of Xue Jianfeng's lips curled up. It was true that he had been intimidated by the other party previously, but now he had seen through the other party's false bravado. Furthermore, Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. If he couldn't kill her even with this, he might as well find a piece of tofu and kill himself. Sure, let's give it a try, someone responded, but it wasn't Bing Wuqing's voice. Hearing this voice, Xue Jianfeng's expression instantly changed. Lung Lung's expression also changed greatly. However, the former's expression became extremely unsightly, while the latter was overjoyed. No one would have thought that Lin Yi would actually show up at Middle Island at this time. This was purely a coincidence. The reason why Lin Yi appeared here was purely because the situation at Blue Cloud Sect in the North Island was almost under control, so he came to Middle Island to visit Lung. He didn't expect to run into this matter. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for just a few months, your wings have hardened. You're not simple. Lin Yi looked at Xue Jianfeng, who was standing on the high platform. His expression was neither happy nor sad, making it impossible for others to guess what he was thinking. Because the lesson from last time was still fresh in his mind, even though Xue Jianfeng had now become a peak early-stage nascent soul expert, which was completely different from how he used to be, he still subconsciously trembled when he was looked at by Lin Yi. However, this instinctive and inexplicable uneasiness was quickly suppressed by Xue Jianfeng. Now that he was already at the peak early-stage nascent soul, if he was still afraid of Lin Yi, who was merely in the foundation-building stage, wouldn't he be laughed at by others? Ha 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 ha, what a good day today. I can't believe there's such a pleasant surprise. Bing Wuqing, you've done a good job. You're really a guy who knows how to adapt to the circumstances. You're really good at changing the rudder when the wind blows. Xue Jianfeng laughed and looked at Bing Wuqing with a face full of praise, giving people the impression that Bing Wuqing had listened to his instructions and deliberately led Lin Yi to his death. He had never forgotten the great shame that Lin Yi had brought him before. Originally, he thought that he would at least have a chance to avenge himself when he went to the North Island, but he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to come to his door at this time. That being said, Xue Jianfeng didn't have the guts to really kill Lin Yi in broad daylight. After all, it was a serious matter. Not only he, but even the bespectacled doctor above him couldn't bear it. But as long as no one was killed, it shouldn't be a problem to give him a good punishment. Bing Wuqing ignored him. She didn't even have the mood to talk to such a low-level person who was trying to drive a wedge between them. If Lin Yi took the bait so easily, it could only mean that he was blind. Bing Wuqing had never thought of herself as a blind, disabled person. Lin Yi also ignored him and walked directly toward the other party. Bing Wuqing wanted to follow him, but he waved his hand to stop her. Just watch the show. There's no need to be so nervous when dealing with this kind of trash. Xue Jianfeng didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed and snorted. You talk big. People who don't know you might think you're some old nascent soul realm monster. Hee hee, there's really no one who can act like you. To tell you the truth, I'm not a person who likes to show off. Most of the time, I'm just doing normal things, like killing an ant with a wave of my hand. But in the eyes of people like you, I'm just showing off. Don't you think that's unfair? Killing an ant? Who's an ant? Do you mean that I, an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, am just an ant in your eyes? Ha 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 ha. Xue Jianfeng laughed maniacally at the sky, laughing so hard that he couldn't catch his breath. After a long while, he finally straightened his body and mocked. Looks like I wasn't wrong at all. You're not just acting cool, you're even acting swollen. Whatever you say. Now, you can kneel. Lin Yi's tone wasn't aggressive at all. It was calm as usual, as if it was a matter of course. She had thought that Lin Yi would be able to deal with Xue Jianfeng. Otherwise, with Lin Yi's style, he would not have come forward so rashly if he did not have enough confidence. However, the scene of him forcing Xue Jianfeng to his knees with such ease really refreshed Bing Wuqing's worldview. Wasn't this boss of hers a little too strong and unreasonable? Heh, you're quite sensible in the face of death. Seeing this, Linny smiled. Seeing that Xue Jianfeng had been scared to the point of wetting his pants, he then released his primordial spirit, allowing him to escape. After all, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. Even if it was for Longling's sake, Lin Yi could not directly kill Xue Jianfeng as soon as he arrived. Moreover, the unfathomable core was involved. Lin Yi did not plan to take the initiative to fire the first shot yet. Naturally, he would not mess up his rhythm just because of a mere Xue Jianfeng. When the primordial spirit returned to his physical body, Xue Jianfeng's face turned pale. Although he did not seem to be injured at first glance, in fact, having the primordial spirit forcibly extracted from the physical body was a very damaging thing to his vitality, especially since Xue Jianfeng was an expert who relied on the core's techniques to forcefully reach his current level. In this aspect, primordial spirit was completely weak, so the impact was even greater. Without a few months' time, Xue Jianfeng would not be able to recover to his peak state. I have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and let me go. I won't dare to do such a stupid thing again. I won't dare to do it again. Xue Jianfeng hurriedly begged for mercy while trembling with fear. He almost buried his head into the ground. After all, he was not a fool. Although Lin Yi had released his primordial spirit, with Lin Yi's technique just now, killing him was almost a matter of a thought. In order to live, he had no choice but to beg for mercy. Is that so? But why do I remember that I just taught you a lesson a few months ago? Now, you don't recognize me anymore. What if you go back on your words in the future? I don't trust a guy with a criminal record like you. Lin Yi looked down at him from above. This, Xue Jianfeng crawled on the ground. Instantly, he was sweating profusely. He did not even have the chance to refute this kind of thing. He could only beg with all his might, "Please believe me. I really won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. Elder Xue, please forgive me if I have offended you in any way. I represent all the disciples of the Snow Sword sect in gratitude." Hong Qingyuan also came forward with a group of elders to plead for mercy. No matter what, Xue Jianfeng was still a member of the Snow Sword sect. Moreover, he was a nascent soul realm-old monster that they needed to rely on in the future. If he were to die in the hands of Lin Yi, it would be an incomparably huge loss to the entire Snow Sword sect. Chapter 5378. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Xue Jianfeng's face turned red. Seeing that Lin Yi's murderous intent was getting stronger and stronger, he had no choice but to clench his teeth and cripple his left arm. This should be enough, Xue Jianfeng said, enduring the pain. Scram. If there's a next time, you won't have to kneel. As Lin Yi spoke, he sent Xue Jianfeng flying with a kick in front of everyone. If this happened again, it would be Xue Jianfeng's death date. At that time, even if he didn't want to start a war with the Cinder, he definitely wouldn't let this scourge live. Xue Jianfeng retreated in a hurry with the help of Xue Liping. Everyone's attention once again fell on Lin Yi. Witnessing this scene, Hong Qingyuan and the others were shocked and in awe. They did not dare to have any other thoughts. This person was too terrifying. I am the sect leader of Snow Sword Sect, Hong Qingyuan. May I know your name, and what orders do you have for my sect? Hong Qingyuan braced himself and asked on behalf of the crowd. My name is Lin Yi. As for my identity, I am now the Grandmaster of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. You don't have to restrain me like this. I'm here to visit Long Long and Wu Qing. There's nothing else, Lin Yi answered casually. Although they had already guessed it, hearing it from Lin Yi's mouth still shocked everyone. The way they looked at Long Long and Bing Wuqing changed a little, thinking to themselves that it was no wonder these two had improved so much in such a short period of time. It turned out that they had found such a powerful backer outside. This was incredible. At this moment, the elders, including Hong Qingyuan, could not help but break out in a cold sweat. It was fortunate that they did not offend Lung Lung before. Otherwise, if they had been like Xue Jianfeng and called him a traitorous disciple, they would have followed in Xue Jianfeng's footsteps, or even worse. After all, they did not have Xue Jianfeng's strength. If Xue Jianfeng was an ant in front of Lin Yi, then everyone present was not even an ant. They could only be regarded as dust. So it's the martial granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. It's an honor to meet you. Please forgive us. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly saluted to Lin Yi together. Their attitude was even more humble than that of the people of Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Although they were from the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island and had nothing to do with the Snow Sword sect in the Middle Island, they should have the awareness of dust. Not to mention other aspects, at least they had to show their attitude on the surface. Ignorance is not a crime. Besides, I'm here as a private person, so there's no need for all these formalities. Lin Yi paused for a moment before saying, as an outsider, I shouldn't be able to comment on the matters of your Snow Sword School. However, since it's related to cold, I still have to ask. Is she a traitor disciple of your school? Of course not. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly denied. If she's not, then why didn't anyone stand up to stop Xue Jianfeng from treating her like this? Does the Snow Sword School not even have this basic rule? Lin Yi frowned and said, This. Hong Qingyuan and the others could only look at each other and smile bitterly. If they had the strength to stop Xue Jianfeng, they would not have allowed Xue Jianfeng to be so unscrupulous. But he was a nascent soul-old monster, and even Bing Wuqing was seriously injured. What could they do? You're one of the 10 small sects and families after all. It's a bit embarrassing for you to act like this. Lin Yi taunted them mercilessly. To be honest, he was suppressing his anger at the moment. Luckily, he happened to be here. Otherwise, if something really happened to Cold, Xue Jianfeng would naturally be the culprit, but these incompetent higher-ups of the Snow Sword School would not be able to escape the title of accomplice. At that time, the entire Snow Sword School would have to bear his anger. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of you, senior. Hong Qingyuan and the others collectively sweated. Although the other party's words were unpleasant, they indeed could not refute. No matter how powerful Xue Jianfeng's strength was, they were the actual decision-makers of the sect's affairs. According to the ancestral teachings, unless it was a major event that concerned the survival of the sect, the Supreme Elders could not interfere with the sect's affairs. Just from this point alone, the entire higher-ups of the Elders Guild were collectively derelict in their duties. Logically speaking, I shouldn't say this as an outsider, but Cold and I have a special relationship. I don't want anything to happen to her, otherwise. He did not finish his words, but the meaning was clear. Lin Yi smiled and said, Speaking of which, I have a bit of a relationship with your Snow Sword School. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I don't want to make things unpleasant. Is that okay? Yes. We'll keep your instructions in mind, senior. Hong Qingyuan and the others hurriedly responded, but they were a little confused. This senior granduncle of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island actually said that he had a bit of a relationship with our Snow Sword School. What did that mean? Little did they know that the so-called relationship Lin Yi mentioned was actually with the Snow Sword School on the Heaven Island. After all, Sydney had stayed in the Snow Sword School before, and even Wei Shinjin was a member of the Snow Sword School. Lin Yi was treated as a distinguished guest by Hong Qingyuan and the others. They were all extremely respectful, even more humble than when they were facing Xue Jianfeng. This not only showed that Xue Jianfeng's popularity was too poor, but it also fully reflected the philosophy of the ancient Jianghu, which was to respect the strong. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng, who had escaped a calamity, did not hide away to heal his wounds, nor did he go to find the glasses doctor and the others. Instead, he went straight to the forbidden area of the Snow Sword School, the Snowy Peak. As one of the 10 small sects and clans, the territory controlled by the Snow Sword School was naturally not small, and the Snowy Peak was the highest peak within a radius of 100 miles. Strange mountains and rocks towered into the sky. The peak was covered in snow all year round, and the temperature was extremely low. Let alone ordinary people, this place was definitely a forbidden area for Foundation establishment experts. Even the Golden Core experts could not last long. This place was the activity territory of the nascent soul-old monsters. Before the rise of Xue Jianfeng and Bing Wuqing, there was only one nascent soul-old monster in the entire Snow Sword School, and that was the Grand Elder Yu Taizong. Without Yu Taizong's approval, other than the sect leader Hong Qingyuan, No one dared to trespass the snowy peak. However, Shui Jianfeng clearly did not care about this little rule. He did not come before because he did not want to. After all, the environment on the snowy peak was so harsh, and it was better to be tyrannical down there than to come up and suffer. But now, the situation was different. Because of the existence of Lin Yi, this place was probably the safest place in the entire Snow Sword School for him. Unless Lin Yi deliberately wanted to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Shui Jianfeng, he could not possibly barge into the forbidden area to find trouble with him, right? Chapter 5379. Shui Jianfeng's main mission this time was to execute the traitor Bing Wuqing. But now that Bing Wuqing was not dead, he was forced to cripple his own arm. How was he going to explain this when he returned? Linny can't stay here forever. I'll hide first. When he leaves, I'll settle the score with that dead face and Lung Lung. Shui Jianfeng gritted his teeth. Although he was extremely unwilling, in front of Lin Yi's tyranny, he could only choose to endure the humiliation. However, before Shui Jianfeng could properly rest, a powerful aura from the top of the mountain had already enveloped him. Shui Jianfeng's heart suddenly trembled. This aura was actually stronger than his. It seemed to be at least mid-stage nascent soul. No, it should be mid-stage peak. Yu Taitsong? After seeing the appearance of the person, Shui Jianfeng almost blurted out. This person was the great elder Yu Taitsong. But wasn't this old man always in seclusion? Why did he suddenly come out? Nascent soul old monster? Who are you? How dare you break into my Snow Sword Sect's forbidden area? Yu Taitsong was equally shocked after sensing the other person's aura. His first reaction was that the Snow Sword Sect had been invaded and even exterminated. After all, the other party had even sent out a nascent soul old monster. That was definitely a situation where they would not rest until they were dead. In the entire Snow Sword Sect, who else but him could deal with a nascent soul old monster? But after being stunned for a moment, Yu Taitsong quickly reacted. This person in front of him was not an outsider. After all, Shui Jianfeng was once a representative figure of the Snow Sword Sect. As a great elder, he had seen him several times and could not completely not recognize him. Elder Yu, you've come out of seclusion? Shui Jianfeng also reacted and quickly corrected himself. His strength was only at the bottom of the early-stage nascent soul realm, but this person in front of him was a true mid-stage nascent soul realm expert. How would he dare to be the slightest bit disrespectful? You are Shui Jianfeng? What's going on? How did you suddenly become a peak early-stage nascent soul realm expert? Yu Taitsong was dumbfounded. In less than 2 years, he had gone from foundation establishment great perfection to nascent soul realm peak. This kind of thing really overturned his worldview. Normal people would not be able to accept it. This is a long story. There are some fortuitous encounters that ordinary people can't imagine. Of course, the most important thing is still my own extraordinary talent. I'll tell Elder Yu in detail in the future. Shui Jianfeng evaded the important and dwelled on the trivial. Super talent? Yu Taitsong didn't hide his suspicions at all. Shui Jianfeng's natural endowments were indeed not bad, but in his eyes, he was far from being nature-defying. At least, he couldn't be compared to Bing Wuqing. What kind of nature-defying opportunity did this brat get? Let's not talk about this first. Elder Yu, our Snow Sword School is in big trouble. Shui Jianfeng rolled his eyes and pretended to be anxious. What big trouble? Yu Taitsong was originally prepared to question Shui Jianfeng, but his attention was immediately diverted. After taking a look at Shui Jianfeng's left arm, he asked in a deep voice, "You were injured by someone?" To be able to injure Shui Jianfeng, an existence at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, that person's strength absolutely could not be underestimated no matter how one looked at it. If they were not careful, it might be a great crisis that could lead to the annihilation of their clan. Yes, the one who injured me was the newly emerged immemorial grandmaster of the Blue Cloud clan in the North Island. This person is called Lin Yi. He colluded with the traitorous disciples of our Snow Sword School, Long Long and Bing Wuqing. Not only did they find an opportunity to injure me, but they also worked from the inside and outside to control the entire sect. Shui Jianfeng took the opportunity to fan the flames. His plan was very simple. Since he couldn't defeat Lin Ai, then he might as well provoke this peak of the middle nascent soul realm Yu Taizong into action. It would be best if he won, but there was no loss if he lost. There's actually such a thing. Yu Taizong fell for it as expected. Hearing that, he was instantly enraged. There was actually someone who dared to collude with the traitorous disciples to control the Snow Sword School. How could this be tolerated? However, before Shui Jianfeng could rejoice, Yu Taizong immediately retracted his anger. Looking him up and down, he said in an unfathomable tone, "You can't be deceiving this old man, right? How could that be? Whether what I said is true or false, with Elder Yu's intelligence, you only need to go down and casually walk around. What's the point of me lying to you here?" Shui Jianfeng said without changing his expression. Is that so? Yu Taizong was skeptical. After all, he was an old monster who had become shrewd with age. No matter how good Shui Jianfeng's expression was, he could not hide some extremely minute flaws. However, Yu Taizong could also feel that the other party's words were half true and half false. At least he could be sure that the strength of that Blue Cloud clan in the North Island, Lin Yi, was definitely not to be underestimated. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to injure Shui Jianfeng's arm. It's absolutely true. If this goes on, our Snow Sword School will completely fall into the hands of outsiders. You, the pillar of stability, must not ignore this. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly advised. Even if it's really as you said, I'm afraid I'm also powerless right now. Yu Taizong laughed bitterly. If he heard these words under normal circumstances, regardless of whether it was true or false, he would definitely go down the mountain to verify it. But now was really not the time. Shui Jianfeng suddenly choked. In fact, he was not so naive as to think that he could completely bluff Yu Taizong with just a few words. In his plan, as long as Yu Taizong went down the mountain and saw him, he would definitely fight with Lin Yi. After all, no matter what, it was an undeniable fact that Lin Yi had interfered with the internal affairs of the Snow Sword School. It was also a fact that he had colluded with Long Long and Bing Wuqing. And in the eyes of the people in charge of the school, either one of these two things was an unforgivable felony. Why? Shui Jianfeng asked unwillingly. It was rare for a fighter to come to his door. He did not want to let it go so easily. Because I've just come out of seclusion. Yu Taizong glanced at him. Isn't this just right? Let Elder Yu exercise your hands and feet, and let everyone have a good look at your newly increased strength? Shui Jianfeng still did not give up. The problem is that my seclusion this time failed. Not only did I not advance to the next level, but I also suffered a not light backlash. Yu Taizong shook his head with a bitter smile. He had already been in seclusion for a full 3 years. The effort he had put in was not little. His goal was to break through to the late nascent soul stage. But the result was that he failed to break through and was injured by the backlash. It really made him feel depressed and want to vomit blood. Although he had not met Lin Yi face to face, since the other party could cripple Shui Jianfeng's left arm, it could be imagined that his strength must be above the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Even the most conservative would be the middle nascent soul stage. With his current state, he might not be able to gain an advantage and might even suffer a big loss. The older one was, the more they cherished their life. Yu Taizong was a typical example. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he would absolutely not take any risks. Especially since this guy was an ambitious person, then he, Yu Taizong, could not rashly leave the mountain at this time. At the very least, he had to wait until his injuries were healed. After waiting for a long time, seeing that Yu Taizong didn't continue after saying preposterous, Shui Jianfeng was instantly dumbfounded. Frowning, he glanced at this grand elder and said, "Elder Yu, you wouldn't be afraid, right?" Nonsense. Yu Taizong couldn't help blushing, glaring. This old man is a dignified middle-stage Yuanying expert. Looking at the entire primordial underworld, the number of people that can defeat this old man can be counted on one's fingers. Why would I be afraid of an insignificant nobody? Then you are? Although Shui Jianfeng didn't say anything unpleasant, his expression had already explained everything. But that expression had already explained everything. Within the suspicion, there was clear disdain. Being looked at with such a gaze, anyone would be enraged, let alone Yu Taitsong, who had always been high and mighty. However, Yu Taitsong ultimately still endured. Everything cannot be impulsive. One must think thrice before acting. This old man is currently injured. If I rashly go down, other than putting myself in a passive position, there is no benefit. As you said, this Linny won't start a massacre at my snow sword sect for a while. Why don't we wait for a while, and wait for this old man to recover before leaving the mountain? Then when do we have to wait? Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but frown. Things can be done slowly. In any case, you are now a peak early Yuanying expert. Why don't you even have this little bit of patience? Yu Taitsong looked at him with some dissatisfaction. He paused and said, according to what you said just now, that Linny wants to dip his fingers into Snow Sword Sect. He won't leave for a while. What's the harm in waiting for a month or so? This, Shui Jianfeng choked. He couldn't help but think that he had miscalculated. If he had known earlier, he would have changed to a more urgent way of speaking. He was very clear that Lin Yi definitely wouldn't have the leisure to dip his fingers into Snow Sword Sect. If he waited for a month or so before leaving the mountain, he would have long disappeared. What? Don't tell me you have something to hide from this old man? Yu Taitsong said suspiciously. He was originally a fellow who had become shrewd with age. His vigilance was naturally unquestionable. Although Shui Jianfeng could be considered as someone on his side, suddenly becoming a peak early Yuanying was really full of strangeness. With Yu Taitsong's suspicious nature, it wouldn't be easy for Shui Jianfeng to completely gain his trust. No, absolutely not. Shui Jianfeng jumped in fright. If he were to fall out with Yu Taitsong, he wouldn't have a good ending. He quickly changed the topic and said, actually, I know of a good place. Not only can it let Elder Yu quickly recover from your injuries, it can also let you advance a level in a short period of time. What place? Yu Taitsong was startled, his expression showing some disbelief. Speaking of this, in less than 2 years, I broke through from foundation perfection all the way to today's peak early Yuanying. Elder Yu, don't you think it's strange? Shui Jianfeng said with a flash of inspiration. Of course it's strange. Yu Taitsong's interest was instantly aroused. His first question just now was about this matter. It was just that Shui Jianfeng had laughed it off temporarily. Looking at his posture, could it be that this brat was willing to say the real reason? The reason is very simple. It's because I joined an unfathomably powerful organization. It's precisely by relying on the organization's power that I completed my current world-shaking transformation. Shui Jianfeng's tone was filled with pride. Joining the center could be said to be a turning point in his fate. Although he couldn't avoid being controlled by the poisonous gas, compared to the supreme strength he could easily obtain, this little regret was nothing. Organization? Yu Taitsong's eyelids twitched when he heard this. His entire aura immediately became somewhat unfriendly, his tone unfathomable as he said, You joined another organization? In other words, you've already betrayed the Snow Sword Sect? As long as one joined another organization, regardless of whether it was a sect or a family, they would naturally be seen as betraying the sect. This was an undeniable point. Chapter 5381. He had long been mentally prepared for this. Since he dared to say these words, he naturally had a certain degree of confidence in his heart. After all, through the conversation just now and his previous understanding of Yu Taitsong, this great elder was not an inflexible person who didn't know how to adapt. Oh, then this old man will listen respectfully. Yu Taitsong was indeed just putting on a show. Clearing the house was just a slogan to deceive people's hearts. When it was needed, he would use it to shout. As for now, it clearly hadn't reached that step. With the power of the organization, since it can make me a peak early Yuanying stage expert in less than 2 years, then naturally it can also easily make Elder Yu a level higher. At that time, let alone late Yuanying stage, even the unprecedented great perfection of Yuanying stage is not impossible. Elder Yu, don't you want to give it a try? Shui Jianfeng tempted. Although these words were a spur-of-the-moment idea, it wasn't entirely his own idea. Before this, the bespectacled doctor had mentioned the possibility of recruiting Yu Taitsong. But firstly, this person had always been in a state of closed-door training. Secondly, this person's strength was too high. Without a suitable opportunity, it would be difficult to recruit him. Therefore, he had never tried it. Now, because of Lin Yi's pressing, it could be considered a rare opportunity. It was just right to push the boat with the current. Great perfection of Yuanying stage. These words to any Yuanying stage old monster was a fatal temptation. Yu Taitsong was naturally no exception, especially at this juncture where he had just failed to break through to the late Yuanying stage. The impact of this temptation was almost invincible. Unsurprisingly, Yu Taitsong fell into silence. If it was anyone else who said this, he would definitely scoff at it. But Shui Jianfeng, a living example, was standing in front of him. He couldn't help but believe it. After a long while, Yu Taitsong's breathing was somewhat rough as he raised his head. You really have a way to let this old man touch the great perfection of Yuanying stage? Of course, I have never had the habit of wasting my saliva. Right now, I am formally extending an olive branch to you on behalf of the organization. Whether or not you want to become the #1 person in the entire immemorial small Jianghu will depend on Elder Yu's decision. Shui Jianfeng was all smiles as he continued to persuade Yu Taitsong, but he was secretly calculating in his heart. If he could convince Yu Taitsong to join them this time, it would definitely be a great merit. At that time, not only would the bespectacled doctor not punish him, he would even be heavily rewarded. As for the so-called #1 person of the immemorial small Jianghu, this was just a fool Yu Taitsong who didn't know the inside story. When the center really grasped that technology, he, Shui Jianfeng, could become a nascent soul great perfection expert in minutes. Under focused nurturing, he might even be stronger than this. The so-called #1 person was nothing. Silence again. At this time, silence in itself was already a kind of attitude. Yu Taitsong was clearly moved. However, in the end, he was still an old monster with a suspicious nature. If he wanted to make Yu Taitsong take the bait with just a few words, he was still lacking by a bit. Elder Yu, there is one more thing that I have to remind you of. That Lin Yi's strength is not to be underestimated. Do you know how many moves he used to turn me into this state? Shui Jianfeng continued to strike while the iron was hot. How many moves? Yu Taitsong asked subconsciously. One move. I had no power to resist in front of him. My left arm was forced to be crippled. In order to lure the other party to take the bait, Shui Jianfeng spoke the rare truth this time. He smiled bitterly. Although your strength is much stronger than mine, to tell you the truth, even if you completely recover your strength at the peak of the middle nascent soul stage, you still may not be that Lin Yi's opponent. At that time, no matter what you do, you will have to look at an outsider's face. Can you bear it or not? Is this true? Yu Taitsong immediately sucked in a breath of cold air, easily finishing off a peak early nascent soul stage expert in one move, and moreover making the other party unable to resist. Even if he recovered to his peak state, he still wouldn't be able to do it. Absolutely true, you will know once you ask. Shui Jianfeng spoke with certainty. Although family scandals should not be spread, this matter had after all happened in public. There were too many people who knew, and Yu Taitsong was not one of them. In this way, the last line of defense in Yu Taitsong's heart finally loosened. On one hand, there was the temptation of a nascent soul stage expert, and on the other hand, there was the unfathomable threat of Lin Yi. There was no use for him to continue staying on the snowy peak. After all, what was the use of recuperating? All right, this old man agrees. Yu Taitsong quickly made a decision. Great, let's go down the mountain quietly now. I will bring you to my superior. Shui Jianfeng was instantly overjoyed. This time, he could finally atone for his mistake. Coming down from the snowy peak, the two concealed their auras and quietly left the territory of the Snow Sword faction, heading straight for K Luo Mountain. The entire Snow Sword faction was completely unaware of this. As for Lin Yi, he was personally treating Bing Wuqing's injuries. Previously, when she was in seclusion, she was ambushed by Shui Jianfeng. Bing Wuqing's injuries were too serious. This was no longer something that could be cured with a recover pill. If it was not treated carefully, it was very likely that there would be repercussions. Fortunately, Linny was here. This little injury was nothing to him. After the treatment, Bing Wuqing went into seclusion again. With the effects of the supreme-grade condensing nascent pill, she quickly advanced to the next level and became a peak early nascent soul stage expert. In this way, he once again stepped on Xue Jianfeng. With the gap between their innate talents and foundations, it was impossible for Xue Jianfeng to be a match for him at the same level. There was no doubt about this. Bing Wuqing's successful advancement made Lin Yi feel slightly relieved. He had been accompanying Long Long all this while. Other than the first few days when the two of them had fun, it was Lin Yi who guided Long Long in her cultivation. It was not just about the realm level, but more importantly, the development of the shattered ice physique. After all, the two trump cards, including the prison drawing and the shattered ice prison mirror, were developed by Lin Yi's help. Of course, with Long Long's level of comprehension, she could explore on her own. However, she did not have Lin Yi's experience and vision, so it was inevitable that she would take some detours. Moreover, it was difficult to see any immediate results in a short period of time. Therefore, even if there was some suspicion of spoiling things through excessive enthusiasm, Lin Yi still took the job of guiding and coaching her step by step. The center was watching covetously, and it was impossible for him to stay by Long Lung's side all the time. Finding a way to improve Long Lung's strength as much as possible was the only way. However, even so, Long Lung's strength could not be improved to a level where she could truly protect herself in a short period of time, especially when facing an opponent like Xue Jianfeng who was in the nascent soul stage. She really did not have many choices. It could only be said that she had Bing Wuqing by her side to take care of her. Unless the other party had some explosive improvement in strength, Bing Wuqing's current strength should be enough. Chapter 5382. It wasn't that Lin Yi was in a hurry to leave, but as an outsider staying in Snow Sword Sect for such a long time, it was inevitable that people would criticize him. In particular, the way he appeared was too eye-catching. It was only natural that people would say that he had ulterior motives. Don't look at how Hong Qingyuan and the others were all respectful like grandsons in front of him. In fact, they were all on guard in private, afraid that Lin Yi would have any ill intentions. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to withstand it. Looking at the way Tian Xue Jianfeng was dealt with, even Grand Elder Yu Taitsong might not be able to handle it. They still didn't know that Yu Taitsong had already followed Xue Jianfeng to Keiluo Mountain. At this time, if Lin Yi had any bad intentions, no one in Snow Sword Sect would stop him. Fortunately, Lin Yi didn't think about that at all. Apart from dealing with the expansion of the center, he basically came to the ancient small Jianghu as a tourist. If it weren't for Chen Jiao and Chen Dongqing who were so stupid, he didn't even think about controlling the Green Cloud Sect in the North Island, let alone the Snow Sword Sect. After leaving Snow Sword Sect, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the Blue Cloud Sect in the north. With Xinejia controlling the situation, plus Hong Zijuan's assistance, especially since the biggest variable, Chunjiu, had been eliminated, the Qin family's high and mighty faction had now fallen apart. Even if the remaining people wanted to cause trouble, they didn't have the strength to do so. There was nothing to worry about the Blue Cloud Sect in the north. Since it was rare for him to come to Middle Island, apart from visiting cold, Lin Yi also planned to take a look around. He wanted to experience the customs of this Jianghu, as well as investigate the strength of the top figures, so that he could make corresponding countermeasures in the future. As for Lin Yi's next destination, it was Yiling's sect. He was going to Yiling's sect to see Duanmu Yu. After the wonderful experience in the ancient trial, their relationship had far exceeded the scope of ordinary friends. Now that he had come to Middle Island, he should go. Keiluo Mountain was originally an ownerless land, but now it had been turned into a central base by Dr. Glasses and the others. Although it was still in its embryonic form, it was already beginning to take shape. It was just like a replica of the central headquarters in the secular world, but the overall structure was very secretive. If they didn't know about the Dark Clan's inner circle, even if there were disciples from the far ancient era who barged into the Dark Clan, they wouldn't be able to notice anything amiss. In a huge underground chamber, there were 5 ice coffins neatly arranged. Each ice coffin had a person lying in it. From left to right, they were Chanjiu, Qin Dongqing, Lu Pingon, and Shui Jianfeng. The last one was Yu Taicong. Snow Sword Sect's Grand Elder, Yu Taicong, was now like Shui Jianfeng, already a member of the core. Actually, when he had first followed Shui Jianfeng to Keiluo Mountain, Yu Taicong hadn't completely made up his mind to join the center. Although he was indeed a little moved after hearing Shui Jianfeng's words, his attitude at that time was still mainly half-believing and half-doubting. However, when he saw Qinjiu and the other 2 lying in the ice coffins, especially when he found out that Qin Dongqing and Lu Pingon, the 2 high-level gold core cultivators of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island who he had dealings with before, had now stepped into the peak of the early Yuanying stage, Yu Taicong was completely shocked. After the shock, the next thing was simple. Since the center had proved that they had the ability to produce Yuanying stage-old monsters in batches, then it was naturally not difficult to imagine that they could promote people to the peak of Yuanying stage. Yu Taicong didn't hesitate for too long and quickly accepted the invitation of the Glasses Doctor. On the surface, it was like this. In fact, if people like Yu Taicong said that they would completely submit to the center all at once, the probability of this happening was not to say that it was impossible, but it was absolutely negligible. This was a mutual use. When he reached the peak of Yuanying stage, there would be no one stronger than him in the world. At that time, no one could stop him from leaving this mysterious organization. This was Yu Taicong's real thoughts. After all, the center was too secretive. Even if they had agreed to join on the surface, it could not be said that there was any degree of recognition in private. At most, it was just an organization with great value. Someone like Yu Taicong, who was used to being aloof and powerful, would not easily surrender. Little did he know that from the moment he agreed, Yu Taicong was destined to be unable to get rid of the shadow of the center. How could the benefits of the center be so easy to take? Looking at the 5 ice coffins in front of him, the Glasses Doctor was in a good mood. The expansion plan to enter the small ancient underworld, although it was still in the early stage of preparation, was unexpectedly smooth. If this development continued, it would not take long to replicate the successful precedent of Heaven Stage Island, and it could be foreseen that this side would definitely be able to control the overall situation faster than Dr. Luan. After all, the strength level of the small ancient underworld was far worse than that of Heaven Stage Island. With a great contribution, from now on, he would be able to truly rise to the top of the center. The Glasses Doctor thought happily, Shuanya Lake. This was not the largest lake in the Middle Island, but it was definitely the most famous lake in the entire Middle Island and even in the small ancient underworld. At the same time, it was also recognized as one of the most unfathomable places. The reason was very simple, because this was the base of the Yiling sect. A large number of pavilions were all built in the middle of the lake. This was the most unique aspect of the Yiling sect. This alone was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. After all, this not only required a lot of manpower and financial resources, but also a series of special protective formations and other supporting facilities. This kind of extravagance was not something that an ordinary sect could afford. Although the Yiling sect had been passed down for thousands of years, it had always been lacking in disciples. Compared to the other large ancient sects, the number of disciples was at most 1/3 or even less. However, it had always firmly occupied the position of one of the 10 small sects, which was enough to show that its foundation was extraordinary. The scenery is really good. It's a good place to play. Linny reclined in a small boat and slowly approached the pavilion in the middle of the lake. He could not help but feel relaxed and happy as he looked at the surrounding scenery of the water and sky. Duamu had not mentioned much about the Yiling sect before, but he had more or less mentioned it when they were chatting. Shuanya Lake was one of the famous places in the small ancient underworld, and this reputation was not given for nothing. The person driving the boat was a middle-aged man. When he saw Lin Yi's relaxed expression, he could not help but ask, "Sir, are you just a tourist?" "You can say that, but I'm mainly here to see a friend. Judging from your attire, you should be an outer disciple of the Yiling sect. You know Duamu, right?" Lin Yi asked casually. Chapter 5383. Now, he was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. His strength and aptitude were not good enough. He didn't even have the chance to go to the secular world in the primordial trial. According to the rules, he naturally had to call Duan Muyu eldest senior sister. Lin Yi nodded. The man's surprised reaction was not strange. Duan Muyu was a famous person in Yiling sect, and she was recognized as the person who would take over the sect in the future. Ordinary people probably couldn't get close to her even if they wanted to. "May I know your name?" the middle-aged man asked quickly after the surprise. Lin Yi said his name, and after thinking about it, he added his background, North Island Blue Cloud Sect. As one of the 10 small sects and families, North Island Blue Cloud Sect and Yiling Sect didn't have a good relationship, but they still had some connections. It should be more convenient to use this identity. "You're Lin Yi." The middle-aged man's reaction was even more strange. "Why? Have you heard of me?" Lin Yi was stunned, but then he felt relieved. After experiencing those things in the secular world, his name had long been known to everyone. After these people came back, they inevitably talked about some interesting things with their fellow disciples. It was not strange that the man had heard of his name. "Well?" The middle-aged man nodded with a strange expression and then didn't say anything more. When they reached the shore, he led Lin Yi to the door of the pavilion on water. After telling Lin Yi to wait at the door, he quickly went in to report. After a while, the middle-aged man came out, but Lin Yi didn't see Duan Muyu. "Come with me." The middle-aged man glanced at Lin Yi and then led him into a small path next to the pavilion. Lin Yi looked around and couldn't help but be surprised. At the end of the path was a long staircase. It didn't lead up, but down. The key was that it was extremely deep, dozens of meters deep. It should have reached the bottom of the lake. That was not all. After reaching the bottom, there was another long tunnel. After walking in the tunnel for 2 hours, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. "Eldest senior sister is in front. You can go in. She lives here." Lin Yi frowned a little. There was an iron gate in front of him. He didn't know what was behind the iron gate for the time being, but normal people wouldn't like to live in such a deep and secluded place. He didn't notice that Duan Muyu had such a hobby after getting along with her before. For now, the middle-aged man was non-committal. "Thank you very much." Lin Yi nodded. Of course, he sensed that something was amiss, but he came here to see Duan Muyu. Since the other party said that Duan Muyu was inside, there was no reason for him to shrink back at this time. Without thinking too much, Lin Yi immediately pushed open the door and strode in. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, Lin Yi immediately understood what was going on. It was a formation. There was no doubt that this was a formation, and it should be a special formation for trapping people. After discovering this, Lin Yi's first reaction was not to frown. Instead, he couldn't help but want to laugh. As soon as he arrived at the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, he was tricked into entering the heaven-climbing formation. Now he came to Yiling's sect and entered another formation. It seemed that the level was also not low. What kind of fate was this? "Lin Yi, why are you here?" Soon, Duan Muyu's joyful voice came from the front. This was a medium-sized secret room, complete with tables and chairs. At this time, Duan Muyu was sitting on the bed in a daze. When he heard the door open, he thought it was another fellow disciple of the same sect. It wasn't until he saw Lin Yi's appearance that he realized it was him. He was overjoyed. "It's rare for me to come to Middle Island. I came to see you." Lin Yi smiled casually. He looked at the iron gate that was closed again behind him, and then carefully looked at Duan Muyu. He sighed with emotion. "I haven't seen you for a few months, and you've lost a lot of weight. Are you losing weight in seclusion?" Duan Muyu originally had a lot to say, but she burst out laughing when she heard this. "Losing weight is losing weight. Why would I need to go into seclusion? Besides, how am I fat?" No matter how much of a tomboy she was, she still couldn't escape the nature of a woman. Duan Muyu wouldn't tolerate herself becoming a fat girl. Moreover, she had nothing to do with the word fat. At most, her figure was more fit and beautiful. Moreover, It was the light and graceful kind of fit and beautiful. Then why did you find such a strange and weird place to go into seclusion? Or is this where you usually live, your boudoir? Linny smiled. Their relationship had unknowingly become very close after going through the primeval trials. Although it wasn't quite the same as Cold and the others, they spoke as if they were old friends. There wasn't a need to be too particular. Do you think so? Duanmu rolled her eyes in amusement. Although this place had all kinds of furniture, there were no small decorations that a girl's boudoir should have. There wasn't even a decent mirror. No matter how much of a tomboy she was, Duanmu wouldn't not need a mirror. Which girl's boudoir didn't have a mirror? Not really, but with your style, it's not impossible. Linny grinned. I'm not that careless. Duanmu snorted and then explained. This is a detention room. It's specially used for disciples who have committed crimes. What crime did you commit? Linny asked. Divine knowledge grass. Duanmu spat out 3 words. What crime did you commit? Linny was even more puzzled. I don't know why, but the higher-ups of the sect found out that I obtained the divine knowledge grass. Moreover, someone asked me to hand over the divine knowledge grass in public, but I refused. Duanmu said calmly. Hand over the divine knowledge grass? Your Yiling's sect has such a rule? Linny frowned. Usually, no matter what kind of treasure the disciple got during the test, it belonged to the disciple himself, and there was no such thing as handing it over to the sect. There was no such thing in the common world, and there was no such thing in the heavenly island, and it was the same in the ancient small world. Otherwise, it would be a huge blow to the disciples' enthusiasm. Who would be willing to risk their lives for treasures then? No, but the situation this time is special. After all, the divine knowledge grass is not an ordinary treasure. Duanmu shook her head. That was what she said, but it was impossible for her to hand over the divine knowledge grass just like that. It was one thing to be loyal to Yiling's sect, but it was another to hand over something that belonged to her without any principles. Speaking of which, who did you hear about the divine knowledge grass from? Linny suddenly asked. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.